I'm going to go ahead and call the meeting to order, please. I'm calling this meeting to order at 6 p.m. This is a joint meeting with the school board for Tuesday, March 26, 2024. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
I will, Madam Mayor, and I'm going to start out with the assembly. Tim Heel, are you on the phone? Stephanie Nowers. Here. Dee McKee.
Here.
Robert Yunt, are you on the phone? Bill Gamble.
This is Rob.
Oh, thank you. Bill Gamble.
Here.
Dimitri Fonoff.
Here.
Ron Bernier.
Here.
Thomas Berge.
Here.
Kendall Cruz.
Here.
Catherine McCollum.
Here.
Jubilee Underwood.
Here.
Brooke Pitcher.
Here.
Ole Larson.
Here.
Ted Swanson.
Here.
Madam Mayor, you have a quorum of both bodies.
Thank you. Are there any changes to the agenda? Seeing and hearing none, the agenda is approved as presented. If you'll all stand, please, and I'll ask School Board President Jubilee to lead us in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The next item on our agenda is audience participation. We do have a sign-up sheet. For those of you that have not testified since I have been mayor, from the very beginning, we have set parameters, and they are that you are to be respectful to each other. You can clap if you are in support, but you cannot hiss or you cannot speak out when someone else is testifying. It is G-rated because our meetings are being taped and we do not know who's listening to those meetings. Thank you. I appreciate it if you would abide by that. The first person that has signed the sign-up sheet, and also we do have a sign-up sheet, but if you did not sign up and you want to testify, we will certainly accommodate you also. So Nick, the school board?
You want to try the last name?
No. I will embarrass myself enough tonight without intentionally doing it at the very beginning.
That's okay. My name's Nicholas Abramchek, and I was always AB, so in school growing up here in the valley. I started out at Snowshoe and then Cottonwood Creek all the way up through Wasilla High. Was the first always, so thank you for that. And I signed up first today by coincidence. My son was here earlier. He was running around. He's got swim practice tonight. He's a first grader at Academy Charter, so I'm here to speak on behalf of why you guys are having a joint session, which I think you guys will also find is probably beneficial for everybody here, including yourselves, to get together and collaborate on a very important issue for our community. So I just want to say thank you for taking this initiative forward. As you guys know, in Juneau, they're having a little dysfunction down there, unfortunately, I think, but you guys are going to send in the right message, and I appreciate you guys taking the opportunity to hear our input, and good luck. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
I'm in favor of the bond.
Oh, okay. The next one is J-I-G, just seeing it. Oh, Jackie. Oh, okay. All right. Oh, okay.
When you don't write left-handed, you know. Good evening, members of the boards, Madam President, Mayor. I want you to know that everything I have told you, I have given you documentation to prove. I don't sit up here and spout fiction. I never have. And what I want you to know is there was a presentation put out by the American Library Association down in Texas called Books Under Fire, and in it they said the Supreme Court has identified limited categories of speech that is not protected under the First Amendment, and the top one is obscenity. There's a category of constitutionally protected speech for adults that is not protected for persons under 17, and that is harmful to minors or obscene as to minors. Now, there's a certain amount of hubris going on in the Valley right now. There are people who seem to think that if they're educated and they think what obscenity is, then that puts them akin to brain surgeons. But if you question them and you say, no, that's not what it is, then you're an auto mechanic, okay? And you can't correct them. This next post comes from a school board member. And what she says is, Each board member was allowed to select one member for the Citizens Advisory Committee on the school board. In addition, 2 librarians, 2 educators, and 2 board members were selected to serve on a 13-member committee. Everyone who's been there, and I have, knows there's only 11 members, and there's no board members. But you can't correct it because she's got me blocked. The next one, you're going to hear somebody who continually says that they've spent $3,000 every month to ban one book. It's an advisory committee. What they've actually done is made sure that none of them go back into elementaries. There's only 2 that they've said are okay for middle school. There are 12 that they say are okay to retain in the high school only, and they've removed 9. They've said 9 should be removed from all libraries. But somebody needs to remember that they're an advisory committee. They weren't supposed to make the decision. So the fact that they've spent $3,000, how much is the innocence of a child worth? Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Chris?
I'm Chris Tyree, and I'm here to talk about being 49th in the national studies in the United States. Mississippi used to be 50th, now they're 41. And still Alaska is 49th in the national testing, and they've been there, close to 30 years, and I've been complaining close to 30 years that they need to change their curriculum, and they don't. They never try to change it. You're teaching, I call it confusion teaching, some of it. I have a 40-year-old man that helps my grandson with his homework, and he has a hard time with it. So if an adult has a hard time with some of this work, how is a second grader supposed to know it? When you add 831, it should be just 831 and 292, not 830 and then 9, because you're adding more steps. Just teach them how to carry, how to borrow, and why you do that. I just don't understand why they're not teaching like they used to when I was a child. You get it in your head a lot better when the teacher's up there at a board writing and talking and spewing it out to you. And they're not doing that anymore. It's just so chaotic, and the kids are complaining. It's not just my grandchildren. I hear other kids complaining that they can't get it. And the schools are more endorsing if 5 people get it and they're doing great, well, the whole system's doing great. Well, that's not it. All of the kids are not doing good. Most of them are wanting to quit school. They're not interested in it. The teachers are not able to have freedom to teach in their fashion and in their way. And when you want to have a meeting with a teacher, it's, oh, well, we have to have the team meeting. So it's 10 people against the parent and the child. No. Let us talk to the teacher by ourselves with the child.
Thank you. Karen?
Good evening, Madam Mayor, Assembly, and School Board. This is done by Carolyn McGahee from The Sun. Public libraries are at the front lines of the culture war, with each side crying censorship. The left is decrying right-wing book bans, and the right says librarians are run by progressive librarians hell-bent on limiting access to Christian books and events while subjecting children to inappropriate sexual context. Republican lawmakers in several other states are now pushing to sever their state's relationship with the ALA as well. It's not just Ms. Drabinsky's self-proclaimed Marxist lesbian identity that they take umbrage with, but also the so-called woke ideological posture of the association and what conservatives see as a progressive takeover of libraries. Absolutely. The conflict has been playing out all year with fights over pride book displays and drag queen story hours. A Christian book publisher, which is Brave Books, and Growing Pains star and Christian children's book author Kirk Cameron are claiming censorship from the opposite direction. For the religious views, Mr. Cameron told Fox News he tried to host a library reading of his new Christian children's book, As You Grow, and was denied by over 50 woke libraries that have hosted drag queen story hours. It's ridiculous. On Saturday, Mr. Cameron organized a national See You at the Library Day, calling on Christian families across the country to reserve meeting room space and host events at their local libraries. Mr. Cameron's August 5th event at an Alabama library was initially canceled and then allowed to proceed after his attorneys intervened. More than 300 people showed up, including some protesters. The ALA has been critical of book bans, but they don't have to ban books if they can just ban authors instead. That's a senior counsel at First Liberty Institute said that. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Mary Robinson?
Are we ready? Good evening, everyone. You know I'm always courteous and respectful and address all of you by names, but I'm just going to say hi. My name is Mary Robinson, and I'm a borough resident, and I represent myself. I know that you'll be considering the ordinance serial 24-039 on April 2nd. I believe that the Matsu Borough LCAC, Library Citizen Advisory Committee, is ill-advised and misguided. You have the school board LCAC as an example. If the borough chooses to move forward on ordinance serial 24-039 on April 2nd meeting, I'm putting myself forth as a candidate for the MSB LCAC member. I'll be happy to send my particulars to the mayor and my assembly member. I will enclose my references from my pastor and Bible study group. I have worked with 3 mayors through 2 decades and been appointed to many commissions, task forces, committees. I have served as board member and president of several nonprofits throughout the valley. One nonprofit had a budget of over $3 million. Through my work experience, I have experience working with, how shall I put this charitably, difficult people, and I don't tolerate bullies. So to humble brag, I think I would make an excellent candidate for the Matsu Borough LCAC member if you do decide to go ahead with ordinance serial 24-039. Thank you for your time.
Karen Olson?
All these people only got 2 minutes, so we can, if you want.
Good evening,
Hi.
Mayor, Madam President, School Board, and Borough. My name is Karen Olson, and I'm a robotics teacher and on the APC board at Twinley Bridge Charter School. I just wanted to thank you very much for coming together and giving your support in assisting us in requiring the funding needing so we could continue along with our expansion. Thank you very much.
I've just been informed by the clerk that the first 4 people that spoke, the deputy clerk only put up 2 minutes instead of 3. So if any of you would like, and I see 2 people have already left, but Nick and, let's see, Chris is gone too, isn't she? So I think, Nick, you're the only one that's left of the first 4 people. If you'd like another minute, you're welcome. You're fine. Okay, thank you, sir. Okay, Carl Chappelle?
Hello, Carl Chappell, resident of the borough. My kids go to American Charter Academy out by Parks and Pittman. I'd like to thank you for adopting and budgeting for the bonding of the schools. A little bit of the background is I'm a fire protection engineer, so I do building construction reviews and things like that. So I worked and volunteered with the school and the architects and the designers to make sure that the building was code compliant, as well as a low-cost building design as much as possible. And so we would appreciate the approval of the bond to build the new school for American Charter Academy. Thank you.
Thank you. Drew?
Good evening.
Good evening.
I wrote a short 14-page dissertation. Just kidding, I'll stay within my time. My name is Drew McIlvain, and I'm here to comment on the school bond proposal. I'm a parent of 2 kids who have attended American Charter Academy, with my older son graduating from AMC in 2022, and my younger son currently still there at AMC and will be graduating at the end of this school year. Both my sons excelled at AMC, completing middle school with a 4.0 GPA. My wife also works as an employee at AMC, and I'm a member of the Academic Policy Committee for the school. I'd like to urge the Assembly and the school board to keep the school bond proposals as one package, as opposed to dividing them into 2 separate bond packages, as I believe if they were kept as one, that Matsu voters would be more likely to vote and pass the single bond, providing new new buildings for some charter schools and much needed maintenance for many of the other schools. The charter school bond proposal is particularly important as Valley Charter Schools continue to increase enrollment and provide students and parents with more options and a quality education for our children. American Charter Academy specifically offers students and families a more personal learning experience, utilizing a multi-age classroom approach for many of the classes, allowing older students to assist teachers in coaching and mentoring younger students. American Charter Academy is in dire need of a new school building, as their current building is in a modified strip mall off of Pittman Road. AMC already has land designated for their new school building and has paid a portion of the school design work. Acquiring funding for the low-cost building design would be the final hurdle to provide American Charter with their own school building. And as many are aware, Alaska charter schools were recently ranked #1 in the nation in a Harvard study, and Governor Dunleavy has expressed support for charter schools in Alaska. So I would like you to please consider keeping the school bond proposal as a single bond in hopes that it will be approved by the voters in November and provide the Matsu Valley with much needed new facilities and funds for necessary maintenance of existing facilities. Thank you.
Thank you. Elaine?
Good evening, members of the Assembly and School Board. I would like to thank you for the opportunity to speak and for your support for charter schools. I'm here tonight to speak as a parent of students at American Charter and as a member of the American Charter APC, along with the other charter school representatives. I was here in this Assembly chamber a few years ago asking the borough for funding for AMC's new school. And I'm here again tonight, still advocating for funding. I have been a small business owner here in the Valley for over 6 years. However, my most important role in all is being a mother to 7 of my 7 children, who have all attended AMC or are currently still there. My second daughter is a senior this year at Matsu Middle College and will be graduating May 14th with UAA scholars in the top 10% of her class. I recently asked her about her academic accomplishments, and her reply to me was, "I would not be where I am today without American Charter and Miss Brady pushing me towards academic excellence. The foundation which I received there was a building block of my success today." Having grown children here in the Valley, pursuing their life dreams with good jobs, one just completed building his first home. Another one will be starting her business in a couple months here in the Valley. They love Alaska and the opportunities and choices they have here in the Valley. Over the last 15 years, I've watched AMC grow and change to accommodate the needs of their families. I'm here to ask that the public charter school bond be combined with the major maintenance bond on this fall ballot. Just one vote for all schools. While working on the AMC building committee last year, we worked hard to come up with a low-cost in today's standards, with a no-frills building that would fit our needs for the school for years to come. I feel as a community member and the elected officials here that it is our duty to continue to support the needs of all schools for the future growth of our community. Thank you.
Elaine, would you state your name for the record, please?
Elaine Ridlon.
Thank you. Melissa?
Good evening, Madam Mayor, Assembly members, and school board members. Thank you for your service to our community. My name is Melissa Wilkins, and I am the chapter chair of Moms for Liberty, and tonight I'm speaking on behalf of a mom who reached out to me after a disturbing incident at one of our local high schools. Due to privacy matters, I will not be sharing any names nor the school name, but I feel like this is an issue that needs to be addressed. There is a substitute teacher in our district who is calling white male students racist and the source of all our country's problems. They were told they should be ashamed of themselves and what they represent. This sub is taking up teaching time ranting about students' white privilege. When the young men tried to defend themselves, the sub yelled at them, refusing them the opportunity to speak freely. One in particular student was verbally attacked, mocked, and ridiculed for his Christian faith. Think about this. A group of young men had to sit through a whole class period being ripped apart for their immutable traits and being blamed for all the racism and evils of the world. That is disturbing. The principal was informed and an investigation was done, and it turns out the situation was even worse than the student described. These boys received bullying and harassment from a sub-teacher. The principal even admitted to that. But this teacher is still allowed to teach at the school. Why? There needs to be accountability. I spent some time looking into board policies because it seems to me that even a sub-teacher should be held to the policies and ethics of our district and state. This teacher potentially violated BP 4055, political activities of employees, and a clear violation of BP 4035, Code of Ethics, took place, which states, members of the teaching profession are obligated by law to abide by the Code of Ethics and professional standards adopted by the Professional Teaching Practices Commission, 20 AAC 10.010. The Professional Teaching Practices Commission states that a violation of this section is grounds for discipline as provided in AS 14.20.030. Section B5 states, may not expose a student to unnecessary embarrassment or disparagement. Section B6 states, may not harass, discriminate against, or grant a discriminatory advantage to a student on the grounds of race, color, creed, sex, national origin, marital status, political or religious beliefs, etc. Section B9 states, shall accord just and equitable treatment to all students as they exercise their educational rights and responsibilities. Section C2 states, shall take responsible precautions to distinguish the educator's personal views and those of any educational institution or organization with which the educator is affiliated. The sub-teacher violated the Code of Ethics our district holds. If sub-teachers and teachers aren't held accountable, then who will stop this or something worse from happening to our students within our district? The Code of Ethics states, sorry, thank you.
Alida?
My name is Ron.
Hold on, 1 second.
My name is Ryan Funoff, and I love American Charter Academy, and I love our teachers. Thank you, Ms. McElvain and Ms. Kirkhoff, and for amazing principal, Ms. Farron.
Yeah, that was his version of Bond, so we're in favor of Bond.
Hi, my name is Alida Funoff, and I love American Charter Academy. It's fun and you get to make new friends. I'm so excited for our new school. You definitely know our school's a little old. We are gonna love our new school, and if it is your first year here like mine, I know we will have a great time here, and I also honor the teachers here. Please help us achieve our dreams, and our dream is to have a new school.
So that's all the people that signed up, but now I will open up to anyone here that would like to, just come on up, state your name, and give us your
Hi.
input.
I'm Michelle Dempsey from Palmer. I represent myself. First, I want to second what Melissa mentioned about the ethics and the standards of the school. If there's policies that are unenforced, what good are policies to have? And so I agree with that something should be done about the subs. We need to start holding people accountable. My other issue I want to talk about is the bond. My kids are all out of the house now. I'm just a property taxpayer that is willing to pay for school bonds, and I also agree that they should be kept together, whether it's in the amounts that was put forth or not. But to show the unity of charter schools being public schools, I think it makes sense to keep maintenance bonds together along with the charter school. So people, not everybody has kids in charter school, but some kids have their kids in the other schools, Colony and all the other ones, and they all need some work. So I think for unification, keeping that bond together is a good idea. And that's all I have.
Thank you. Yeah, just start coming, and you can just line up there.
Madam Mayor, members of the Assembly, and our school board, it's great to see you all here. I'm not here to complain about anything. I'm just want to thank you for the good job you're doing. My name is John Miller. I've been a resident of the state of Alaska for 50 some odd years and a resident of the Matt Valley for over 40 years. I raised 5 kids here. They all went through the public school system. And I got a whole slug of grandkids, 20, and I really want them to stay in Alaska so I don't have to chase them all over the world. Anyway, what I have to say here today might make some people unhappy. I have no problem supporting the school bond with my taxes. I've been doing it for a long time. However, I don't want my property taxes to go to this woke ideology, Common Core, CRT, DEI, gender identity, abortion activism, things of that nature. The pornography and the library books. I don't want my tax dollars going there. And also, about 80% of my property taxes goes to the schools. And those property taxes support our facilities, and our big portion goes to their salaries. And a portion of that salary goes to support unions. And those unions take my tax dollars and use them against me to spend thousands of dollars for the candidates that they want to sit on the school board. And those candidates that are supported with a lot of money, I think thousands of dollars to support candidates sometimes, they get to choose our superintendents. And so basically my tax dollars are being used against me, and I don't like that. And I don't like the fact that it's the unions that are supporting all of this woke ideology. They don't seem to be interested in the academic side of things, but the ideologies, the indoctrination of our children seems to be their priority. So if you are a teacher and you're supporting this stuff, you don't need to. You can opt out of the union, and there's very little consequences for doing that. You won't lose your benefits, you won't lose anything. But I don't know how you could, support. I don't like my money supporting this. I don't think if you're a teacher, you should be supporting this stuff either. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Madam Mayor, members of the school board and assembly, my name is Molly Connor. This is Sage Clark and Grace Connor, and we're here tonight speaking on behalf as not only a parent of 3 beautiful children here in the school district, but as the Academy Charter School vice president of their advisory board. So I want to first say thank you. I was there at the school board meeting last week. The unanimous support of charter schools is fantastic. I think charter schools in Alaska have done an amazing job of showing that they're an acceptable, wonderful, exemplary method of education and education choice for kids here in the Valley and Alaska as a whole. I heard amazing conversation that night at the school board meeting about the splitting of the bond versus keeping the bond together. And I thought that the discussion of that was wonderful. We are here to speak on behalf of keeping the bond together, but I appreciate the very wonderful, rigorous discussion you guys had on the matter at the school board meeting. Mine will be short and sweet. My kids, I have a 2nd grader and a kindergartner. We've had nothing but wonderful experiences at Academy, and I just want to say thank you for the wonderful charter school options we have here in the Valley.
Next.
Hello, Madam Mayor, Assembly, and school board members. My name is Jonathan Zeppa. I also have 2 children in Academy Charter, and I have 2 requests tonight. The first has already been said several times. I'd like to keep the bond together. I appreciate the discussion last Tuesday. I was there, or Wednesday, sorry. And, but I believe that it will have a better chance of being passed overall if they're together. The other thing that, as was already mentioned, charter schools, provide freedom of choice. And it's not easy sometimes to get into them. It took us 5 tries with 2 children over the course of 3 years to get into Academy, and we just kept putting it in until we got the lottery. So the other request that I have is the 25% cost share, if you will. That is, I'm still scratching my head about it. I understand there is a benefit to showing skin in the game, if you will, for charter schools. However, public charter schools is a alternate method of education that allows choice. And the problem with the 25% cost share is that we're talking about, for Academy specifically, it's almost 1/6 of the annual allotment that goes for my children's education. So when we talk about that, there's going to be some detriment to the ability of Academy Charter to educate my child if they're having to put that much down up front. All the other public schools in the Valley were either a bond or a grant. As far as I know, I don't think there was a whole lot of education money skin in the game for those schools. So, and maintenance is the same way. We're going to pay 100%. All the education dollars. I know the borough manages that budget. I understand that. But that budget manages, and there is some cost savings. There is some cost savings when you buy in bulk, so to speak. There's also some things that the borough is responsible for overall for the 48 or 49 schools, public schools. I understand that, but 25% is a huge burden to bear, and it's going to impact my children's education. So I please reconsider that. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, school board members, and assembly members. I'm Susan McCauley, the principal of Birch Tree Charter School. Thank you for the opportunity to provide input regarding the bond proposal you will discuss this evening. You may know that this is my 2nd time around as the principal of Birch Tree. 13 years ago, I made the decision to leave a district office administrator position to become Birch Tree's first principal. I did that in part because of the challenges I saw ahead for the founding group of parents, particularly with regard to obtaining a facility and navigating all of the affiliated district and borough processes. Ultimately, we were able to find a private contractor to fund and construct a school for 230 students in a matter of 5 months. Fast forward to today with 2 facility expansions, 2 portables, and 400 students. Our facility has served us well, and we're grateful for the leap of faith our building owner took on us 13 years ago. However, our program has reached a point of being limited by our current facility and by the fact that 18% of our budget goes toward lease costs and general operations and maintenance of that facility. We are unable to hold school-wide events at the school due to inadequate meeting space and parking. Increasingly, we are renting, at additional cost, of course, the Glen Massey Theater for concerts and for our 8th grade promotion. One of our 6th grade math classes is taught in a hallway, as are some of our elementary reading groups. Our library is in what used to be a storage closet. We have a makeshift stage built by parents that is used for each grade's annual play performance. You get the picture. Perhaps most significantly, a significant percentage of our budget, nearly $800,000 a year, goes toward facility costs, with no end in sight for that amount ever being reduced, and us treading water in terms of the programmatic improvements that we would like to make. On behalf of the Birch Tree community, I want to thank district administration, the school board, and the assembly as you creatively and in an unprecedented manner help Mat-Su Charter Schools tackle our facility challenges. I assure you that Birch Tree will partner with you to support a bond proposal and continue to provide a program for Mat-Su students that you are proud of. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Hello, Mayor Edna, Assembly members, President Jubilee, and our school board. First, I want to say I'm Bruce Owens. I live in Palmer. I'm a veteran, federal law enforcement officer, and a proud member of Moms for Liberty. First, I want to thank you all for the great job you do. I think you guys bring common sense solutions to big problems. Melissa spoke earlier about the substitute teacher. That's something that somebody needs to be held accountable for their actions. You guys got to do something about that. The main thing that I want to talk about, it's probably a couple school board meetings ago, you guys brought up AI and how technology is moving forward and how to implement that in our schools and probably our borough too. Well, there's articles that are available for anybody to read. A lot of white-collar jobs are going to be replaced by this AI. And we got to think about our kids in the future. And we want to keep our kids here in Alaska because they're good people just like us. And I recently found out that the Wasilla High School has a great program that they're putting forth right now to get kids educated in different trades. These kids can go through and get certifications for HVAC or any electrical, all those type of things. Guess what? Those jobs are not going to be replaced by AI. Guess what? We get those kids certified. Guess where they're going to stay? Right here. Guess what they're going to do? They're going to start businesses. So not only do we need to invest in our schools, our borough, we need to invest in our children. We got to give them opportunities. Not everybody can afford a $100,000 education in college. And I know you guys will do it because you bring common sense solutions to big problems. Thank you.
Next person. Okay. Caleb, do we have anybody online? That's all right, come on.
Hello.
Hello.
My name is Tressa Emlock, and I just wanted to share a brief testimony. It was an experience where my daughter went to the Wasilla Public Library, and she had to write about Anne Frank, and she went ahead and she rented out or checked out a couple books, and one of them was the graphic novel adapted by Ari Fallman. I'm not going to share what's in the book because there's little ears, but it was inappropriate, and it had to do with a sexual nature. And I was confused at this because my background's in media, and we did broadcasting, and you cannot broadcast anything obscene, indecent, or profane. And I just took from the FCC laws that prohibit obscene, indecent, and profane content from being broadcasted. In the Supreme Court, 1964 landmark case on obscenity and pornography, Justice Potter Stewart wrote famously, "I know it when I see it." In other words, if you know it when you see it, and you find it objectable, you can tell the FCC, and please ask them to check into it. Broadcasting obscene content is prohibited by law at all times of the day, surprisingly. Indecent and profane content are prohibited on broadcast TV and radio between 6 a.m. and 10 p.m. when children may be in the audience. The FCC and freedom of speech, the First Amendment, as well as Section 326 on the Communications Act prohibit the Commission for censoring broadcast material and from interfering from the freedom of expression in broadcast. However, the right to broadcast material is not absolute. There are restrictions on material that the licensee can broadcast. The courts have held that FCC's regulation of obscene and indecent programming is constitutional because of society's interest in protecting children from harmful programming and supporting parents' ability to determine the programming their children will be exposed to at home. So why I'm saying all of this is, if FCC values what we broadcast to our children, shouldn't we consider doing this for our children, for what they read about in the library? Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Madam Mayor and Assembly members, Madam School Board President and School Board. My name is Ron Johnson. I'm a resident of Borough District 1. I'm here to speak about the upcoming bond package. I know that the ordinance has not been dropped. I have some concerns. First of all, let me state that I am 100% in favor of charter schools. As a matter of fact, my 3 great-granddaughters are in charter schools, sadly in the state of Florida rather than Alaska, but I believe in charter schools. My concern is trying to put this bond package all together in one big bond package. I've been around long enough to know that if you're trying to get somebody to take some honey or some vinegar, you mix it with little honey to make it palatable. That's what I see with combining. I think there's probably 3 separate issues as far as bonding goes, to my understanding. I really came tonight to listen to the dialogue. I listened to last week's school board meeting to get the dialogue on the bond package. But here's my thought on that. If these proposals are good enough to stand alone, they should stand alone. If a proposal doesn't have the merit to stand on its own, I think we need to consider that. I believe that charter schools are public schools, but they're funded a little bit differently. A charter school has to pay for its own building. I'm fully in favor of charter schools that can help cover the bond cost to borrow for that. My biggest concern, and that's really a big concern, I have a great concern on bonding for maintenance. This borough is, we're probably the most fiscally responsible borough in the state of Alaska. We've done some great things. I want to remind people, I think we built the last 2 schools without debt. That's amazing. We built a couple of fire stations without debt. So this assembly knows how to operate fiscally responsibly. My concern is bonding for maintenance, and I think especially that one needs to be considered because we need to have the conversation, why are we having to bond for maintenance? How did we get in this situation where we have to borrow money to fix things that should have been a regular maintenance program? And how are we going to get out of it, and what are we going to do to see that we don't get in this situation again? So I'm not in favor of combining these bonds, so I know it's ultimately up to the Assembly and what you're going to bring forth, but I'd like to see each one stand on its own merit and discuss, and especially on the maintenance, we need to talk, how did we get here and how are we going to fix it? So thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Todd?
Ron, you're taller than I am. Good evening, members of the Assembly and School Board. Todd Smolden with the Governor's Office in the Mat-Su Valley. I just wanted to say thank you for your service. Thank you to the constituents who are here tonight. I think that as you have conversations about funding and probably thinking about maybe some of the actions of what will happen in Juneau, what the governor's thinking. I think the governor's been really clear about education funding as being part of an overall package of reform that includes some charter school reform to make that easier for people like those who have spoken in favor of charter schools and others who are on wait lists, money that's directly going to be funding the READS Act and support for our classroom teachers, not only with money financially, but also with the resources they need. To be thinking about how that is all one package, and hopefully people will be supporting that as all one package in order to have an increase in BSA funding and other funding. Also, just real briefly, hearing some comments about concerns about things happening in schools. Hopefully that is being run through the normal process of contacting the school district, school board members, but one of the things I do for the governor is work on education policy. So if anyone ever has any questions about state law or other things about teacher certification requirements, ethics, things like that, that's something they could reach out to me about. So thank you again for your service, and I'm so happy to live in the Mat-Su Valley where everybody comes together and it's respectful, and we don't always agree on everything, but at least we can work together. So thank you again for your service.
Thank you. Anyone else? Caleb, do we have anybody? Well, we don't have anybody online. Okay, so I'll give the people here one more chance before we move on. Okay, I don't see anybody, so we'll go ahead and close audience participation. The next item is a couple of proclamations that we're going to do. I'm going to come down there. And so this is proclamations. We have one for the school district, as well as we have one for Amy and her wonderful, I don't even know, 17 adjectives, adverbs that we could say for the host committee for doing the great job that they did on our Arctic Winter Games. It's, as I was telling the school board people when I was up there, I think in my opinion, after we signed the contract, and then one of the first items was when the school board changed the spring break. Because I don't know what we would have done with all of those participants if we wouldn't have had the use of the schools. So I don't know which one came first, the chicken or the egg. But we had to have that. So anyway, and I will have a proclamation. We also have some gifts. We have left a seal from the borough up in front of all the school board members. You're welcome to have that. You got it, Kathy? There you go. Yeah, will be forever on your mind. So whereas the Mat-Su School District, Amy Spargo, chairperson of the Arctic Winter Games Host Society, and the Arctic Winter Games Host Society, along with countless community volunteers. And that was so true. The night you came and spoke to us and said that you had your full 2,000 plus 600 in waiting, I don't know, I probably should have jumped over the diocese and come down and hugged you. It was such good news. And so thank you for following through with that. Whereas the collective effort and collaboration of the Mat-Su Borough community over the past 4 years have nothing been short of admirable, showcasing the strength that we can achieve when us as individuals come together for a common purpose. And whereas Amy's leadership and unwavering work ethic have served as an inspiration to all involved, setting a remarkable example for the entire community. And whereas the overwhelming support and anticipation from the Mat-Su Borough community have contributed to the resounding success of the Arctic Winter Games, fostering a sense of unity and pride among the residents. And it's set in hand by me and witnessed by our clerk. And so you guys all want to come up, please? We have Mike, do you want to help me, please? And George, yeah, if your board can come up.
Can I say a few words?
Yes, absolutely, you can say a few words.
Good evening. I brought our amazing volunteer board. So if folks don't know, the borough got the bid in 2021, and it was Lita Boris and Kim Salyan and Casey Ressler, who were our original people. And they got this whole ball rolling. And then we recruited volunteers. So we have Shannon, who is our director, Shannon Hawkins, our director of culture. Lita Boris, my vice chair. Trent, I'm not going to remember, I know, and my brain is not working. Trent Fair, so I've worked alongside him for 3 years and can't remember his last name tonight, is our volunteer director. And Jeanette Steer, Care and Comfort, Casey Ressler, Public Relations and Marketing, and John Rada is our Arctic Winter Games International board president. And we are so humbled and grateful by the support of the borough and the support of the school district. I can't tell you how much it means to us to see Mayor DeVries with her pins on. And old member Larson's got his volunteer shirt on. He was directing traffic. But really what meant the most to us was everyone coming together for the common good to make something really wonderful happen for kids and for something really wonderful for our borough, where we can show what a great place this is to live and raise our families. And so it was a huge success. Oh, I got Katie over here who's on our board too. She didn't jump up and join us. So Katie Gardner's on our board as our liaison with the school district. So thank you very much. Thank you for your support. Thank you. I'd love to have a round of applause for this group right here. They are amazing.
Amy Spargo, in heartfelt appreciation of your support to the Mat-Su 2024 Arctic Winter Games, your commitment enabled an unforgettable showcase of community strength. Thank you for embodying the essence of community and creating legacy. Mat-Su Borough School District, in heartfelt appreciation of your unwavering support to the Mat-Su 2024 Arctic Winter Games, your commitment enabled an unforgettable showcase of community strength.
How much weight he was losing during the week, and so I just was.
I'm trying to gain it down.
Okay, the next item on our agenda is Dr. Trainee. Do you have an update for us, sir?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. I do have an update, and for school board members, you've seen every single slide. I don't want to ever surprise you, like something hot off the press you've never seen before. So sorry, you have to live through them again. And I know some of the assembly members at one of our Monday meetings, some of these slides will be repeats. But I think they're good things. They're evidence of us doing what we're supposed to be doing towards student achievement with tax dollars, and so I'm proud of it. So here we'll go. And they're in no particular order other than we always end with specific good things. And my clicker, oh, there, it worked. As you know, the governor and the legislature really prioritized the Alaska READS Act. For the Mat-Su Borough, what that means is that we need to grow our students. For whatever reason, when we get kindergartners, on average, compared to the rest of the United States on national tests, when they start, like right off the bat in the first 3 or 4 weeks of school, they're about the 25th percentile. The way you read this particular graph is everything above the 50th percentile on the vertical axis means they've made more growth than half of the people in the country. And each of these dots is one of our schools. And when you go left to right, the further you go toward the right, the further achievement. So we start off with kindergartners in the lower left-hand corner. These are all of our schools, K-8, on the iReady criterion referenced. And at the halfway point, so I believe this was on 12-17, all but one of our schools was above the 50th percentile for growth compared to the rest of the country. And that's, frankly, we've never seen this kind of growth before. On the next slide, if I can get there, oh, wrong way. And that one particular school that didn't quite make it to the 50th percentile for growth, they were at the 43rd percentile, and they'd made 36% improvement in that first half of the year. So fantastic growth across all of our K-8 schools. Another way to look at that is on this slide. The darker line up at the top is the most recent from December data. And the fall data is the smaller line underneath. And this is for all students. It's the same data, just another way to look at it. And you can see that we grew students who were early on or mid or above grade level, that's the green, and we shrunk the students who were behind. It's kind of strange the way this data is reported, and I know the board has heard lots about this. At the beginning of the year, if you were right on track, you would be 1 year behind the way this is reported, because they presume, like, if you were a third grader at the beginning of third grade, you don't know everything you're supposed to know yet in third grade. So you'd be one year behind at the beginning of third grade. And the presumption is by the end of third grade, you would have made all that progress. So to keep it easy, though, we're growing the green, we're shrinking the red. Now, jumping to something, I guess, totally different, away from the READS Act, career technical education. We heard about the importance from one of our speakers tonight. I have a couple different slides about CTE. Roughly, if you become a CTE concentrator and you take 2 courses in sequence in a particular domain, like, say, 2 welding courses, your chance of graduating on time goes up like 98, 99, 97%, depending on the year. About 66% of our most recent graduates are CTE concentrators. CTE is really super important. So in the last 4 years that I've been here, we've been trying to grow it dramatically. And remember, that first year was COVID. We don't like to talk about it, but it did wreak havoc with our CTE programs. So here's another way to look at that. These are the number of student enrollments in CTE courses. So you can see this year is in red. Over 7,965 student enrollment in high school in CTE courses. Keep in mind, we have like 1,300 to 1,500 students per grade level. So we're averaging more than 1 per student in high school. It's pretty remarkable. Board members know I like to use the word "and." It's not when I was in school, we didn't call it CTE, called it VOTEC, right? Go to VOTEC, or you go to college. But we like to use the word and like, here's an example of it. We have lots of our CTE courses where they also get college credit, and we're trying to actively grow that. And you have to think about how a school year, like this school year, was the fall of 23 and the spring of 24. So on this particular graph, I don't have the spring of 24 yet because it hasn't happened. They have to finish here in May. But if you add up the falls of one year with the springs of next, you can see from this that we are increasing those number of 3-credit courses that our students are earning in their CTE concentrator classes. So like in the fall of 23, we had 154 students enrolled in 3-credit college classes in their CTE concentrator courses. Next slide. I've shared this one like lots of different times. It's our number of students in advanced placement courses. You can see that this year we started off with about 2,875. That's remarkably different than it was just 4 or 5 years ago. This is their actual achievement over time. We call it their production rate of college qualifying scores out of 100 students. So we used to, out of every 100 students in high school, have about 4 kids who earned college credit. And after last year's tests, so last May, we were up to about 14. So it's dramatic growth, and that's all kids 9 through 12. I know that this is gonna continue to go up when we get this year's scores. The kids will take the test the first full 2 weeks in May. And then we get the scores roughly the first week in July. This is the exact same data as the previous slide. So that blue line is, can I go backwards? Yep. The blue line here is now on this side. It's still the blue line, so you can see that 4.028, and it goes up to roughly 14. The yellow line is the state of Alaska's production rate, which has gone up, but only because Mat-Su's has gone up. And the red line is the United States. So last year, about 20 out of every 100 students in the United States in high school earned college credit, and we were about 14. I'm very hopeful that this will be the year that we catch up with the national average. One of my mantras is all boats rise and fall on the same tide. And another way I say that is those of us with the most have to want for all kids what we want for our own kids. That means that we shouldn't be just picking our best and brightest and letting them into these courses, these CTE courses and these advanced placement courses. It should be all kids. So this looks at our free and reduced lunch rate at each school and the participation in these courses. And what we want is the bars to be roughly equal. If you have 20% of your kids in free and reduced lunch, then 20% of your kids should be in your CTE courses and 20% should be in your advanced placement courses or your IB courses if you're at Palmer. And the good news is that we're approaching that across the district. The far right column, 30% free and reduced lunch and 27% across the district in these courses. The next 2 slides kind of go together, and it's not only do you want to worry about like your diversity that you have in our community financially, but also we have other sorts of diversity. So you want your classrooms to represent your hallways. So that's what we're looking at here. And we didn't do anything special other than say, hey, guess what? We think everybody can do this stuff, like everybody. And we don't want any filters. Like every kid should be able to take advantage of these kinds of things. And when we did that, our year-over-year change, we had 58% more Alaska Native kids, 125% more Asian kids, 111% more black kids, 28% more white kids, which all by itself was that's amazing growth all by itself. But then we go to the next slide and look at how their achievement changed. So the percentage of kids who earned college credit. So Alaska Natives, we had 58% more Alaska Native kids participate, but 85% more earned college credit. We had 125% more Asians, but 140% earned college credit. 111% more black students, 400% more earned college credit. And we didn't do anything differently than say, everybody should be taking these courses. Last one's super complicated, so I'll only focus in on the green line. It's called equity and excellence, and it's the idea that what percentage of your students have earned college credit through these courses. And each line represents something different. So the blue line in a year is that any time during your high school career did you get a 3, 4, or 5, and the red line is during your senior year, and the yellow line is during your junior year did you earn college credit at any one of thousands of universities across the country. But the green line is the one I want to look at. It's the sophomores. Look at 2020 and 2021. It's like 3.7, 3.6%. So like our very best and brightest, like literally our gifted kids who are sophomores. And then, but we started changing things back then. 2022, 9% of the entire sophomore class earned college credit, like almost a 2.5-fold increase. And then last year, 24.4% of the entire sophomore class, like all the kids in all of the schools as sophomores, had college credit when they left. It's remarkable change. Just to juxtapose these, I say that we are really good at CTE, and I want to drive home, we are really good at it, like 7,965 enrollments compared to about 2,800 in our advanced coursework. Graduation rate, which I think should be one of the metrics that we use to decide, are we doing a good job? Here's our last 3 years graduation rate. I always say I'm standing on the shoulders of giants. Easily before I got here, there were folks who worked for more than a decade to move our graduation rate from something that was like really pretty low to something now that's one of the highest in the state, about 84, 85, 86% any given year. These are the 3 highest consecutive years since 2001. So that's remarkable. And then I know that Member McCullum really likes these next 2 graphs, because this gets to where I started. Like, we're trying to do a good job with public funds, and the thing that we're supposed to do is produce graduates. So are we producing graduates efficiently? And I know that you all know as well as anybody how complicated school funding is, and different districts get just wildly different amounts of money. It costs more to educate somebody in Alaska than it does here. But just using state data, you could calculate the dollars spent per graduate. It's pretty easy to find. They can tell you, every district tells you how much they spend per kid, and then you could divide by their graduation rate, and you could figure this out. So all of the districts are listed here across the bottom. They aren't all named just because there's not physically room to jam everybody's name in. So, Google decides who it's going to print and who it's not. And you can see Mat-Su is that red one. So in this, we're third. We're the 3rd most efficient at producing graduates. But you might be thinking, like, why in the world are there these 6 districts in yellow? Those are districts where more than 50%, in fact, it's more than 80% of their kids are not in brick and mortar schools, and they have a totally different funding mechanism. It's kind of hard to compare the brick and mortar schools with the correspondence schools. They're just funded differently. So next one, if we take the correspondence school districts out, guess who's the most efficient at producing graduates? It's the Mat-Su. We produce graduates cheaper than anybody else. 85, 86% is not good enough. The school board knows that, like last year, I religiously beat them up with our passing rate data every single week. We have moved it from what would have been a passing rate at any given time of like 15 to 20% failure to now 5 or 6% failure. And we know that 85, 86% graduation rate will have nowhere to go but up because of that change. And then I'll end with 2 good things. The school board already knows this. They're invited. We've been doing these school tours. We try to do one a month. This was originally scheduled for the 28th. I think you may have heard about it from Ms. Gardner. A good thing happened. We were going to go to Redington, and we were going to look at their CTE courses specifically, but those kids and their instructors won a trip to Fairbanks to compete in the state competitions on that day. So we had to cancel, and we moved it to the 1st. You're still invited. at 1 o'clock, we'll be at Reddington and then go to Denina Elementary. It's this coming Monday. If you're interested in coming, just get a hold of my office and let us know that you'd like to attend, and we'd love to show off what's going on out there in that part of our district. And the last one, you know how we have signing days for athletes? Why not have signing days for our students who commit to enter the industry and CTE programs? So Wasilla High School is doing exactly that. On April 18th, I can't quite read that. I think it's 1:15 to 2:15 in the theater. They have 14 different graduates this year who have committed to a trade, and they will have a signing day on that day. And if you're interested in attending this, just get a hold of administration at Wasilla High School. I know that they would love to make room have some dignitaries there for signing day. That's kind of my report. I'm sorry, school board, you've seen it all except for this last slide right here, but I think some of you even knew about that. Are there any questions that I could answer about any of this?
Yes, Assembly Person Nowers.
Thank you. You started with good and ended with good. I wasn't sure if it's, I want to start with the good, like the reading is amazing to see, the CTE stuff is obviously amazing, things that go in our schools is amazing. Couple of things, this will surprise no one. I'm really a stickler about using metrics that really show actually measure what you want to measure. We want to measure if we're teaching kids, if we're bringing them along. And so I have two caveats. Well, since you got this slide up right now, this is another metric that I guess doesn't really blow me box off because, and I'll just say this, so maybe we can have a follow-up conversation later, but it doesn't surprise me that Mat-Su, which has a lot of students and is in a relatively cheap area, gets a lot less per student than the Pribilofs or Klawak. I mean, I don't know that this really, I just say it so we can have a conversation about it. It doesn't blow, it doesn't tell me that we're doing good, we're not doing something bad, but we live in a cheaper area and we have a lot of students to amortize the cost over. The other one that I have an issue with is our AP tests, and I just have two caveats to that. One is those AP results, and I have a super high achieving kid. Miss Gerard knows it. She was at Academy Charter, national merit finalist, super good test taker. She did well on AP scores and IB and got what you find at the colleges, they do not offer very much for those AP scores. Any parent who's been through it will see it. Like if you get a 3, sometimes you get nothing. Sometimes even if you get a 5 in the sciences, you get very little at some of those tough colleges. So it doesn't necessarily guarantee you college credit. Like in English, they'll give you English 111, which you can test out of anyway. So that's one caveat with those. And then my other is on the metrics we're showing, we're testing more kids. So this production rate we're seeing is a result of testing more kids. It doesn't necessarily mean we're teaching them. Maybe we are, but maybe we're also just testing kids who already are bright. And so I'm not knocking the AP test. They may get credit for it, but I just like what I want to see, what I want to hear is how are we moving the needle on these kids? And so those numbers don't tell me that we're moving the needle on the kids. I feel it anecdotally. We see amazing things in the schools, but if we're gonna throw metrics out there to show how we're doing, I really wanna see, like in the Alaska Reads, where we're taking kids who are coming in at the 20th percentile and moving them up. So, and then I just had a question on the CTE numbers. We do track CTE kids where they go after graduation, but we do not, and just there's a question, do we track kids who don't go through CTE after they graduate as to whether they go on to college or military or a trade?
I'm going to give you a second to think about this. So I'll stall. The last time that we had an official tracking of our graduates was how many years ago? 2012. And that would have been all graduates, students who were involved in CTE or not, or college prep or not. Right now we've commissioned, or we're in the process of commissioning another study and Deputy Superintendent Gardner has been working on this, so now I'm going to turn the microphone over and she can give you some of the particulars that I know are in her head. This has been something that the board has asked for, like, hey, let's check and find out where they're going. Now, the kids that we're going to be checking on aren't the ones that graduated this year or last year. It's going to be further back than that, but I'll leave it right there and I'll let Ms. Gardner talk.
Thank you. Through the chair to Ms. Nowers, I guess for the record, Katie Gardner, Deputy Superintendent for Business and Operations. So the data that you see on the slide that Dr. Trainee presented where it talks about the 99% and where those students are going, that's not data that Mat-Su is tracking. That is data that the state of Alaska is tracking, and they are not tracking that broadly for all students. They're only looking at some specific areas focused on students who've participated in CTE. And I'm not sure that they're tracking students outside the state of Alaska either. So this is information that the state publishes, and that's where we get this information. But we recognize when our mission is to prepare students for success, that being able to demonstrate what success looks like and how we're doing after students leave the Mat-Su School District is an important metric that we want to be able to report out on, which is why this year the administration, with the support of the board, is interested in figuring out an effective way to track that over time. So we are going to be working on a study that will make that data available, and hopefully we'll be able to do that in a cost-effective way so that it is something that we continue to monitor and maintain over the years and are able to use that to report back to the board, the assembly, and of course the community at large.
Thank you.
Is anyone else? Either? Yes, Assemblyperson McKee, go ahead.
I just visited a site today with the Alaska Policy Forum. I don't know if you guys probably have seen that 1,000 times, but it has all of the schools throughout the state and what their ELA score was, and then their math scores, which are kind of stunning. But they're from 22, 23. But we don't, no, that was 21, 22. We don't have last score, your scores yet, do we? I mean,
Through the chair, very good question. Last week, we got to be careful here. The state inadvertently published all of the scores for a couple hours. They meant to send them out and this is for the 23 AK STAR tests,
yeah.
So almost exactly 1 year after the test. So I have our scores, and then because Deputy Superintendent Gardner and I happened to be on the website, we got to see everybody else's scores, so I know what they are in my head, but I'm not sharing them yet. I will tell you that we look really good compared to the big five, compared to the scores that we saw on that inadvertent show everybody for a couple hours. We look like we were going to compare really well to not only the state, but the other big five.
so when will we know?
April
When you can tell us?
April 17th is the day that they have said that they're going to publicly release the state scores.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
Yes. School board member.
And since we're talking about my favorite subject, the STAR test, and you knew I was going to say something about it, if it came up, the 10th graders at Career Tech took the STAR test today and yesterday, I believe. And guess what? Last year's STAR test results are not out yet. Why does it take over a year for a statewide test to come out? I don't know. I keep asking that question over and over. I know it's complicated. I've heard a lot of different stories about it. The commissioner has responded to it. But when most every test that we take, you can push a button and get results. Here it is, a year later, we're taking the STAR test, and the results aren't going to be out till the 17th. Just think about that. Those results from last year, what good are they? What good are they? They don't help our teachers develop anything. They don't help our teachers in saying, you know, when you get your test instantly, you can say, this child is lacking in this area, and I need to improve in this area. This is a year later. Okay, I'll shut up. I can go on forever about STAR tests. Thank you.
Any other, yes, Assemblyperson Vaughnoff, go ahead.
Dr. Train, thank you so much for the report. Appreciate it, and I really enjoy these meetings all the time.
to change the subject a little bit, this is not consistent to your report, but I think this may be a good time to ask. Have you been brought, was anything to your attention about what in the public comments were spoken earlier about the substitute teachers? Was that anything you have any awareness about that?
No, Deputy Superintendent Gardner and I looked at each other and we were going to try to connect with those folks who spoke earlier to get some information.
Yeah, I would really like for you guys to follow up to figure out what it is. Obviously, that's the first time I heard it, and I would love for you guys to look into that. And I think if it takes anything for the assembly, or, well, not assembly, but we have it here together, and I'm sure we could speak our opinions if needed, but it was obviously pretty obvious what the issue was. That was no, but I wanted to say appreciation to you personally, because whenever I reached out for several things in the past, you answered, you always responded, and I sincerely appreciate that.
Further questions? Yes.
Dr. Training, going back to your slides concerning the graduation rate, do the numbers reflected there, does that reflect both fifth-year and sixth-year seniors in that? And if it doesn't, could you estimate on what that number would look like were we to include those numbers in?
Yeah, so no, this is just the 4-year graduation rate that's published. If we added the 5th year and 6th year, it would go up roughly 5 to 6% in any given year, so we'd be above 90%.
And is there a reason why we don't include the 5th and 6th year graduates in our graduation report?
Only because the state loves to report the 4-year graduation rate, so I always hesitate to put out something people will think that I'm inflating the number. It is true, like, this is something that we really believe in at the school district. Different students can either get through the material faster than their peers, and some get through slower. In fact, the kid who is a 5th or 6th year graduate may be our greatest accomplishment, but it's rarely reported at the state level, and it always lags. You can go find it, but they love to report the 4-year graduation rate. The fact is that we do continue working with our students who haven't graduated on time, which we totally would expect, because some people are faster than others, and life happens too. Life happens with kids. It could be no fault of their own, and it may take them longer. And I appreciate that Member Berge always brings this up. It's good for him to remind us that some of our best success stories are not captured in this graph.
Assemblyperson McKee, go ahead.
So, to kind of key off what Oli said, why do we not do that anymore, get those test results in time to do anything with them? Is that a long-time teacher? When we got they came in July or August, so that by the time we started with those kids for the next year, I can tell you one of the years, Palmer Junior Middle School, my school, was the best in the state, and we just absolutely took those numbers and we said, these are the kids that we really have to concentrate on. We gave 70-minute math, and I was a math teacher at the time, 70 minutes dedicated to that. So there was a reason for it. It's not like, oh, well, he did really well. Oh, so what? How come they don't? Who does this?
So I've been in this seat where I'm defending Deed, and here's what I'll say. They were trying to do something very complicated by going to a new testing mechanism that was both growth-based and criterion referenced. And what I've heard, speaking directly with the commissioner, is that when they first got the results in late summer, early fall, the results were so horrible that it would have been that, like, practically nobody in the state at any school district would have made any progress. It would have just looked like, I don't know. And so I didn't get to see that. I don't know all the mechanics. That's just what I've heard. I appreciate that if that was the case, that then they were like, we really can't release this to the public. And it's taken them that long to get a product that they think fairly represented what our students learned last year, not this year. And I don't want to be defending, because Member Larson is correct. Like as far as planning for this year, these scores were worthless.
Yeah.
This year is over with. Like they, you know, the proof will be in the pudding. Our students are right now taking this year's AK STAR test. Over the next several weeks, each school has their own pattern that they're going to take those under. Sounds like Career Tech was taking them today. The proof will be in the pudding whether we get those scores in a timely fashion. I know that DEED intends to get us the scores in a timely fashion, so they are usable for next year.
That last thing you said is probably the most important thing about it, is they're going to get them sooner so you can do something about them.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep.
Further questions from either school board members and/or assembly? I'm probably going to show my ignorance here, but on the graduation, excuse me, on the graduation rates, that's 85% of what? 85% of the seniors, 85% of the people that have been all 4 years in, or the student that transfers in April and graduates in May, or?
Very
Yeah.
good question.
Yeah,
It's an
yeah.
excellent
I need
question.
some background, please.
So
Thank you.
that 4-year cohort graduation rate are the students that started in the Matsu as freshmen, or transferred in from another school and had started somewhere else as a freshman. The caveat there is, think about that first year for those students. It was a COVID year, and we know that our population across the state, our school-age population took a nosedive. Kids left. If we had had a freshman in those years, and then they left and say they went out of state, and for whatever reason, no one ever requested their records from us, they will count as our dropout. So if a student, even if a student only attended their first day as a freshman, if they registered with us and then we never get a records request for them at any other school, they count as a dropout for us.
Okay. One of the reasons I ask, and I'm not going to give all the details, but recently I did have a homeschool mom that said her student, her daughter, was going to be graduating this year and she wanted to walk with a certain high school. And so, you know, she was going to register at that high school, I guess, a couple of months before, so that would probably be now. And so she wanted to walk with that school. So that's why it got me thinking about, so, and I don't know, you know, whether she would have started out with you as a freshman or if she's been homeschooled all 11 and a half years and all of a sudden she shows up on your doorstep and she graduates and walks, so she would be one of the 85%?
Boy, there'd be so many particulars there, like which home, if she was at our home school, you know, if she was at
Right,
Matsu
yeah,
Central
and
or Twindley, she was ours all along.
Right.
If
She
she
would
was
be in
at
the
another
system.
one,
Yeah.
then if she left their home school and we didn't request her records, she would count as their dropout, but of course we would request her records.
Yeah.
And then she would become our student.
Yeah, okay.
And if she was from out of state, I couldn't speak to what their rules are at the
Yeah.
district that she started at.
Yeah, okay. Any other questions? Okay, so we'll move on then to item C. And Superintendent Trainee, it is you again regarding the budget and bonding for schools. And I know we have a pretty sizable packet here.
I'll echo something that I heard one of our audience members comment on about the robust discussion that our board had at the last board meeting about the bond. I think it's really important to have those discussions in public, and this will be another opportunity. And then also I want to acknowledge my Deputy Superintendent Gardner, who is going to walk us through all of this presentation, and hopefully we'll be able to answer any questions that the Assembly might have.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, President Underwood, members of the School Board and Assembly. We are actually going to start this evening with a review of the school district's approved budget for fiscal year 2025. We do have a budget handbook that has been prepared and published. That's the packet that is in front of you tonight that we will be making available to the community. And we're going to go through some of the highlights that really make up that document this evening. As many of you know, it is part of our code requirement that we present an approved budget to the Assembly during this meeting and provide additional information to the manager and the finance director before April 1st. So we appreciate the opportunity to talk about our proposed budget and, of course, answer any questions that members may have. So for those on the Assembly and the board, I understand you have great context as to what goes into a school district budget. So I will move through some of this relatively quickly. However, of course, if there are questions or you'd like to discuss any particular item in greater detail, we can certainly do that. As you know, our budget starts with a look at enrollment. It is very important that resources follow students, and the funding formula for the state of Alaska really starts that process. And what we are projecting for the fiscal year 2025 enrollment is a very modest increase. In fact, it's only an increase of about 40 students. And so we have seen since the pandemic where our enrollment dropped, students continually come back, but our enrollment has certainly slowed over the last few years. The revenue assumptions that we are proposing are outlined here. Essentially, we have been meeting with the board since January to understand a little bit about what the revenue outlook for the state of Alaska and the borough looks like. One of the areas that makes school district budgeting difficult is the board has to make a decision and approve a budget with a lot of information still unknown to us. And so we have made some assumptions regarding a request from the borough of a 3% increase. That was passed through resolution in the winter and provided to the manager in January. We are also assuming that the base student allocation is maintained at its current level, which is $59.60, as outlined in the governor's budget. But we also are assuming that the one-time funds in the amount of $340 per student that the school district is receiving this year are continuing into fiscal year 25. That is not currently provided for in any legislation, but we do understand that there's been a lot of dialogue at the state level about increases in revenue for school districts, and we did not want to take an overly conservative approach and run the risk of losing important positions and teachers while some of that discussion continues and remains uncertain. The one other area is the PFD lottery, which is very minimal. But those are our major assumptions regarding revenue. In the end, what that provides us with is a general operating fund budget of $263 million. You can see the breakdown of what is being provided for through borough appropriation, local funding, state funding, and then our federal reimbursements. As part of the budget development process, we send a survey to parents and the community on an annual basis, asking for feedback, particularly in the areas of expenditure areas and what their priorities are in the budget. These are the responses from the current year survey. We had a higher return than ever with about 1,700 responses, which is the best response rate that we've had. And we continue to see two areas really at the top in each of the years where we've had this survey. Class size and student safety continue to be primary areas of priority from our community. And of course, as we transition into the expenditure side of the budget, we have a little more complication in terms of the assumptions that exist. And well, my glasses are good, they're not that good, so I apologize. I've got to turn my head to make sure that I cover everything, but I will try not to just read directly from the slide. About 80%, a little over 80% of our budget is based on salaries and benefits, and we have a process that uses our current negotiated agreements and our current staffing levels to make sure that we are as accurate and precise in the mechanisms that we use to project salaries and benefits as possible. So we take into consideration what's been negotiated as well as what might be available for regular step movement, who's taken health insurance. All of that level of detail is incorporated into these assumptions. We unfortunately do have reductions that are being proposed to balance the budget in the area of salaries and benefits. I'll show those in a minute. We also are proposing reductions for school metrics by 17%, and these are school discretionary metrics, not positions, as well as department non-personnel budgets are also being proposed to be reduced by about 27%. We do anticipate that we'll have increases associated with our bonds and premiums. These are for not health insurance, but our general liability. We are looking at maintaining rates for utilities and look at a 3-year period where we evaluate what expenditures have been incurred and will continue. And then, unfortunately, we do have a rather large transfer, which primarily goes to student transportation to offset expenditures exceeding revenues in student transportation. While this is a separate fund, it does have a large impact on the general operating fund because of the size of that transfer. Transportation funding has not increased in the state of Alaska, I think, since 2016. So while our contract costs continue to increase, primarily as a result of inflation and fuel, the amount of money that exists for pupil transportation has remained flat for a number of years. And so when you bring all of these assumptions together, you can see that we have, as required, a balanced budget where expenditures are matching revenue. Here you can see a summary of the primary adjustments. These are not reflected from 2024 budget, but if we were to roll over all expenditures to fiscal year 2025, these are the adjustments that have to be made to bring the budget into balance. One key area and why we're proposing or why we're presenting the information in this way is because for the last several years and for this year particularly, we have relied on federal COVID relief funds to continue operations. This year that's been about $17 million. And while those funds are expiring, there are a number of costs that we have to roll back into the general operating fund in order to be able to continue operations in the way that we have. And because as of right now, there's not a replacement for that $17 million in revenue, we do have reductions that are proposed to bring the budget into balance. At the top, the revenue adjustments have happened recently as we just now, I think a couple of weeks ago, had a final number from the state of Alaska on our enrollment for the current year. And as soon as we had that confirmed enrollment number, we wanted to make sure that we incorporated some of those adjustments into fiscal year 2025. And then in addition, you can see the reductions that are proposed listed there. All said, it is about an $18 million reduction that will be part of the fiscal year 2025 budget with the revenue assumptions that we currently have. This is a different look. It's got some additional detail that you can see regarding what revenue and expenditures look like moving into fiscal year 25. And so as you, one thing I just want to point out that I mentioned a minute ago, if you look at the fiscal year 24 revised budget, that's based on the winter revision that was approved by the board in December. And then you look at the preliminary budget for fiscal year 2025, you'll see some areas where there are large increases in expenditures, particularly in salaries and benefits. The reason that that has such a large increase in the FY25 preliminary budget is because that includes the incorporation of those about $16 million in personnel that are currently being funded with ESSER 3 funds. So those aren't new positions that are added. It's a different funding source that's expiring, and those positions are coming back into the operating budget, and you'll see that that moves from about $223 million to $212 million as the area where, one of the areas where we're showing a reduction to balance the budget for fiscal year 2025. So a lot of information. There's certainly additional information that is provided for in the handbook, and we can certainly talk about any of the areas that we reviewed in greater detail if there are questions.
Okay, questions from the assembly and or school board members? Assemblyperson Fonoff, go ahead.
I don't know if this is question would be for Katie or for Mr. Brown. We have this breakdown in front of all of us and some of the things we've talked. My question, and some of the audience earlier brought up the major maintenance and the budget. I want to know, and if this is, would be, I don't know if we'll have a different time to ask, is why are these are coming up, and potentially we're discussing these 15-some million dollars, and we would have to bond it, I guess. Was there just lack of management in these schools prior, and there was no money set aside, or what is the reason why this would have to be bonded? And I'd just like to have a conversation about this and open discussion. Perhaps maybe somebody else can fill me in a little bit on this.
Through the chair to Member Fonov, I'll do my best to answer that question from the district's perspective, and I'll let Manager Brown talk about, maybe the borough's perspective on this. So these are lists generally of major maintenance projects or deferred maintenance projects. The school district has responsibility in the general operating fund for operating our buildings. That includes generally things like custodial services, minor maintenance projects that might come up. There is typically some coordination and support from the borough on major maintenance areas. We have been working for about a year on bringing forward requests for capital projects as part of the borough's process. And when we communicated our request for local education funding in January, we also provided a list to the manager of some key major maintenance projects that we wanted to work with the borough on funding. And we received a letter back that included some recommendation that a portion of those projects would be available to be funded. And so that was appreciated. I think that is a great opportunity for the school district and the borough to work together. But we also understood that as the school district was preparing a recommendation for the board on the charter school new construction bond project, that we had a secondary opportunity to try to make some progress on major maintenance. And we have managed major maintenance in the past through bond projects. We just haven't done one in the Mat-Su School District in over 10 years. The bond project that passed, and you'll have to forgive me, 2010, 2011, 2012, somewhere in that ballpark, included new school construction as well as major maintenance projects. And we have not brought back before the voters additional support for major maintenance since that time. I do not believe that it is for a lack of planning. I do not believe that it is for a lack of responsiveness on what these buildings need, but it's been a change in the political environment as well. School bond debt match funds, that expired. That was an avenue that we accessed that was no longer made available. And we understood that continuing to bond out for major maintenance in and of itself, there was not a time in which we felt that was necessary or supported on the part of the board or the assembly until we began discussing charter schools this year.
A follow-up before Mr. Brown. So if this goes in front of ballot and people approve it, would next year we'll have a similar, just with different school with different things, and we'd have to change? Or is this something that one time and then we kind of from this is, so how do we prevent it to get new debt for these kind of things from school's perspective? And then I guess we'll hear from the borough's perspective, because it's, to me, I think it's a little bit concerning because the large number, I mean, it's different when we're building a new building, for those charter schools, but this seems like an ongoing thing, and I would not like to see that in the future, so we have to do another one with, there's another roof or another boiler replacement, and all that adds up. I mean, do you foresee this list to be updated next year or with a new cost estimates? I'd like to know what is future holding for next few years, I guess, when it comes to major stuff.
Of course. Through the chair to Member Fonov, this is not the complete list of school major maintenance needs or projects. The school district operates 48 buildings and 3 separate administrative facilities. So there's over $1 billion in assets that the borough owns that the school district operates. And so we have between probably 10 and 20 million of deferred maintenance that comes up annually. And so this project list, which had originally been recommended to be part of the school construction bond, was a way to start some of these projects in some areas that we knew were of high priority. It's our hope that we'll continue to work with the borough on some capital funds that might be able to be used as the years go on. I do anticipate at some point into the future, though we have no plans and have had no discussion with the school board about future bond projects, at some point in the future beyond this, there may be a need for additional projects. Our list of deferred major maintenance is about $150 million in total. So this is definitely not an exhaustive list. We do not have plans to ask the borough at this point in time to do another bond next year.
Can you just clarify, you said it's about $150 million, correct? So this is about only 10% of what is...
So my team is telling me this. So it's between $150 and $200 million of deferred maintenance projects. We could certainly provide a more precise number. The list that exists before you is the top priorities that we have, which get us started on some of these key projects for HVAC controls, boiler replacements. These align with the 6-year CIP list that the board approves on an annual basis. These are some of our top priority projects, though we did make sure that we tried to balance this list and make sure that we were able to cover every area of the borough, and so that each district had a project that improved a school in their area.
Okay, Deputy Mayor Yant's on the phone, and you had a question, sir?
Yes, ma'am. I noticed we have $750,000 on the potential major maintenance bond list here for window replacements. Can you tell me what the total cost per year of natural gas or heating is for those 2 elementary schools?
Somebody have it?
Through the chair to Member Yunt, I do not have that off the top of my head, but we could certainly provide that information.
Okay. Has there been an analysis done from any of the certified energy raters in the state of Alaska to see what the payback would be for a slight improvement in windows as far as how much we would save on utilities?
Through the chair, as I understand it, there has been, I don't know that that is the group that has done the review, but there is expected to be some savings as a result of those utilities with those 2 particular replacements. I'm not sure that it's a one-for-one match or that it saves as much as the window replacements cost. We'd have to look at over what period of time.
Okay, and then the turf and the bleachers, who all has inspected these? That's $5.3 million between the 2. I think I consider myself pretty well traveled. I get to quite a few of the schools other than just my own children's, and I don't remember really looking at any turf or bleachers that ever seemed to me like it was in bad shape. Is this, are these safety hazards, or are these just wants, or are they actually needs?
Through the chair to Member Yunt, the turf fields, as I'm sure you remember, were installed or built, whatever the correct term would be, when we did the bond project about 10 years ago. And so the fields that are in place right now are reaching their end of life. We are not proposing that the fields be completely torn apart and redone, but that there be some key maintenance projects and priorities with these fields so that we are able to extend their useful life. They are pretty extensive projects to do. but it helps us keep these fields in use for a longer period of time. I believe the useful life for the fields when they were installed was about 10 years, so they're kind of reaching the end of that. In terms of bleachers, we could have staff talk about that more specifically. I know some are related to some ADA upgrades and accessibility that are needed. Some are really not functioning on a regular basis when we're pulling them out for fans. But mostly these are changes that schools have identified when they have people in the building. There are some safety issues that we'd like to improve upon.
And then my next question is for Manager Brown. I know we've talked together about putting some money in the budget to replace boilers, ideally dual fuel boilers in case we wind up in a situation where there's a lack of natural gas. But is that something that we're planning on having in the budget this year for the half a dozen or so boiler replacements, give or take?
So through the mayor to the Assembly and School Board. So we talked about this at the last joint meeting. So we took the district's provided list. I took the top 6 projects. I think the majority of them were elevators and boilers. And in the manager's proposed budget for the Assembly to consider will be a $2 million capital line item to address those 6 needs. And so the intent is to take, retiring debt service for schools, add some additional funding and kind of come up with a strategy to start forward funding some of these deferred maintenance items. I'm not going to sit here and suggest to you that $2 million a year is going to be enough, or that it would necessarily be $2 million every year. It might be more, it might be less. We would evaluate that on an annual basis. But for this budget, and I'm pretty certain the local education contribution that the district proposed in the budget that Katie just pitched does not include that $2 million. So the $2 million would be money the borough sets aside in a project account to address those needs in addition to the local education contribution. And like Member Larson, and him going on about STAR test, I could go on and on about school bond debt reimbursement. But in the end, I mean, because I feel like probably owe Mr. Afanov a little bit of this background, the state changed the rules. I just wanted to look back and see if Todd gave me the eye, sorry. But the state did change the rules, right? So, I mean, it made sense for municipalities to bond when the state was paying for 70% of the project, right? That's why the borough passed a $214 million bond back in 2011. But those days are over. They might come back, but it seems kind of unlikely. And even if it came back in a 50-50, I mean, it really did incentivize municipalities to bring bonds forward because, well, they were going to pick up nearly, 3/4 of the cost. And so you haven't seen a bond since the moratorium was put in place by the state. I'm not suggesting which way's the right way or whatever. It's just in the past, the state had participated in major maintenance and the development of new schools. Fortunately, the borough was able to capitalize on the growth that we are experiencing with the 6 new schools that were in that package, and the state reimbursed 70% of it. So that's really good for our community. Now what we're dealing with is we want to move leased facilities into owned facilities, and oh, by the way, we got to maintain what we have. So that's what we're talking about and what that looks like. I don't know that, the outlay that we have, and I'll just be blunt, holding mill rates where they are is going to address the deferred maintenance need. But we're starting to do that. This will be the first year that borough's included in its capital budget, to my knowledge, a line item specifically to fund school major maintenance. So I think it's a step in the right direction. I don't know that it's going to be the right pace, and we'll have to continue to evaluate that. But I think it is a step in the right direction. And of course, if the state's going to reopen, school bond debt reimbursement with a cost share, I think we would probably want to at least evaluate that if they were going to come in even in a 50-50 proposition. It's very similar to what we're doing with our transportation packages that we've been putting before voters as well. So, I like that construct where we both put skin in the game and we see if we can come up with infrastructure improvements that benefit the community. So that's a little bit of the backdrop as to how we got here. As far as where we go moving forward, my only encouragement to the state would be, because whether it's one way or the other, just tell us so there's some predictability. That's what would be really helpful. The not knowing makes it difficult to do long-term capital planning when you're not sure who's in and who's out and what that looks like. And I mean, the reality is I think the state's gonna have a hard time backing away from that because you have rural communities, you know, that don't have the capacity potentially that we might have. And I'm not suggesting to you that, like, you know, the urbanized areas should pay and the rural's different. I'm just saying, like, I think the state's gonna have to find a way to participate in that. The state hasn't, and when I say the state, I'm talking about the legislature, Todd, just for the record, hasn't really taken a position on that. But the moratorium is set to expire, I think, in 2025. So in theory, we would be eligible to put applications forward again. You know, but we had some challenges with getting that reimbursement funded in some fiscal years when the state revenue was down. So there's some risk there because every reimbursement each year is subject to an annual appropriation by the legislature. So that's where I think we're kind of still in that transition period where we're not sure exactly what it's going to look like. In the meantime, we're moving forward to put some funding in a major maintenance account as part of the borough's proposed budget. That went way longer than it should have.
May I? That was a really good answer about boilers. Just teasing. I will say I would have some major hesitation and reluctancy to participate with the state of Alaska again with building more schools. When we started down this process last year, and I really started working towards hopefully getting to this point, because I do absolutely believe we need to build more charter schools, and I can't wait to talk about that more in a bit. But I made it really clear I didn't want to participate with the state because then it comes with strings attached and a lot of requirements to build schools that are very inefficient. So even if they help us pay off the debt on those and build the construction, they don't necessarily help participate in the deferred maintenance later. And look no further than Palmer Middle School if you want to see a good reason not to do that again. But I did one more question in regard to the emergency generators. I see there's 4 of them on here, totaling close to $2 million. Have those been tested by anybody that can give us their professional opinion on them, more so than just, I understand maybe they're not brand new and maybe they're even kind of old, but being that they're emergency generators, they probably don't run very often, and my worry is that they might still just be fine. So, has there been anybody that's inspected those?
And it looks like we maybe, sir, have somebody at the podium with some answers. Yep. Yeah, okay, so
Tony Weiss, I'm with the school district. Hi, Rob. Capital planning and construction for the school district. So we'll hit the generators first. Yes, the generators, we have a generator technician that works with whatever vendor it is. Most of our generators are Cummins or MTU. Those are the 2 main brands. We still have some Caterpillar as well. But yes, all of these generators have had work done or need a replacement. We actually have a matrix of their years, their hour usage, their runtime, the issues they have. We are working towards getting an audit actually done, emergency power-wise, on what they can power. And a lot of these generators are well past their usable life. They're all on the deferred maintenance list, and have needed constant care since I've been here, and I'm going on 10 years now. They were all alternates in line to be funded with the original generator project back in the bond in 2011. And yes, they've all been checked and inspected by our folks as well as technicians with those vendors I've mentioned. Don't know if there's additional question on the generators. I did want to touch on 2 other things. On the bleachers, that is mostly interior bleachers. I think there was some confusion in that. A lot of the high school interior bleachers are in bad shape. And that number you're seeing for bleacher upgrades, yes, it includes some exterior, but it's mostly interior bleachers. And then on the windows, to Rob's question, those 2 schools that are listed were schools that did not get funded in the bond, but they did get assessed, and they were the next ones up way back in 2011. So I'll have to dig up that info. It's going to be based on utility rates back then, but I do believe what we do, or the borough, has those reports. They were assessed by energy auditors. Other questions?
Thank you.
Oh, Assemblyperson McKee, go ahead.
On the window replacement, they're not broken, right?
Several,
Generally.
quite a few are.
Really?
Yes.
Okay,
Not-
so.
Not all of them, no. They
'Cause-
are all past their recommended usable life that are listed on these schools.
But it's like expired medicines, you can usually take them for 2 more years. I mean, is it really that urgent? Because when for instance, just anecdotally, at Palmer Junior Middle School, they came in and took out all the windows, and it's like, why did you do that? Because they weren't leaking, they weren't broken, and it just seemed like a big expense for something that isn't urgent when a lot of these other things, like the generators and boilers and such are. You might think about that.
Yeah, that was before my time. I know some of the windows I did look at Palmer Middle were pretty bad shape, based on architects and engineers' assessments of them. Not saying I saw them personally or saying you're not wrong either, but some of those windows were 55, 60 years old. And they're recommended to be changed every 25 to 30 years is generally about what you're gonna get out of a window, depending on the grade, of course, or if it's an aluminum window or the glazing in it and whatnot, so.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Yikes.
It's just,
Stop.
and then I guess touching on the deferred maintenance number, yeah, the rough number is 150. The real number, if you follow the deed standards, is about 247 million. So of the little over 1 billion in assets that Katie mentioned, we're about a quarter of it is past its expected usable life.
Okay.
And also, as mentioned, we have not done a deferred maintenance bond since 2011. So.
Okay. Assemblyperson Nowers, you had a question, comment?
Thank you. Not so much a question, but it sounds like maybe we should do a deferred maintenance tour with the school district. Might be worth.
I'd be happy.
Yeah, Tony would like it. I see a lot of blank stares out of the audience, and so I just want to say, like, this is such a big deal for the borough because, like, 65 to 70% of our budget, which is everybody's property taxes, go to the school district. For the school district, we're only about 30% of their budget. Most 70% of their budget comes from the states, a little bit of that from the Fed. So, you know, in terms of making decisions about the school budget is very consequential to the taxpayer. And to balancing the budget, because whatever doesn't go to the school district has to be used for all the other things we use in the borough. So it's really a struggle. It's why I like bonding and putting it out to the voters, because that way the residents are telling us we are okay with assessing ourselves extra on our property taxes to pay for that. So I do like having these together with the schools and the maintenance, because it sounds like the needs are there and it gives everybody in the borough something to benefit from the bond. And I see it as being more successful, like 0 of 0 is nothing. We get nothing, or folks get things that they think are needed. And it sounds like, you know, it would be great to have deferred maintenance tour, but it also sounds like even if we have some issues with some of these, there's a lot longer list of deferred maintenance that we could get to. And I really appreciate the questions that have been asked about them. But it does sound like even if we took out a $400,000 boiler replacement, you could make that up with other things along the line that are needed in our schools. So I do, again, really like the bonding, because it's the residents that get to tell us this is important and we want to pay for it.
Further comments or questions No? Oh, sorry, sir. Yes, go ahead. School board member.
How many boilers did we replace in the last year?
Total replacements, 4.
4. What was the cost on that?
Palmer High School was the most expensive one, just because it had to power the whole plant, and it was, with the pumps and piping, a little over $500,000.
So to the 4, do we have a total?
The 2 at Big Lake were 280, so close to $1 million.
So $1 million between the 4. And how do we pay for that?
Want me to say?
Through the chair, I can only speak to the Palmer High School boiler. We asked the board to approve a transfer to the CIP fund last year to support that payment. However, it is one of the boilers that was on the list that we submitted to the borough as part of that capital project request.
So nobody knows how the other three were paid for?
Through the chair, that's certainly information that we could provide Member Pitcher. I just don't know today off the top of my head. I anticipate that those were probably projects that were set aside as part of the spring revision, where funds were moved from the general operating fund into the capital improvement fund to support those projects, but I don't know in which year that happened or the lead time that we had for those projects specifically. We can certainly get back to you on that.
So I guess my question is, how much is the borough willing to put forward towards the maintenance projects? Was it just 2 million? Is that all that is estimated to be available every year?
Through the chair, it's a little bit of a loaded question because we're talking about what is the assembly willing to assess in terms of taxes and what do they want that outlay to be. Every year we evaluate the district's request. This will be the first year where the boroughs put any money aside in the capital budget as part of its annual proposal, because a lot of times in the past that the more minor maintenance was being done by the school district and the larger projects ended up on a ballot proposition for different reasons, some of which, and I think largely because the state participated in that and it was a way to cost share the improvements. So I can't sit here and tell you every year how much money the borough's gonna have to set aside for major maintenance specific to schools, because those needs change every year. So I'm not sure how to better answer that question. We don't have a plan that says there's gonna be $10 million every year to put towards school maintenance. Now, we do know how much school bond debt service is being retired on an annual basis. And what we're doing now with this plan is essentially to take that money as it's being retired, that debt's being retired, and roll it back into schools. That's what this intends to do. But that varies every year based on the debt service payment schedule that was established years ago. So that's what this intends to do is keep money that was being paid towards school bond debt and roll it back into schools in some way to address maintenance needs moving forward.
So would it make sense that we should have an aggressive stance on taking care of our own buildings, as opposed to asking the public to put it on a credit card? I know that's a simple way to put it, but it seems to make sense, does it not? So we're at $247 million. That's an estimate based upon the current needs that are needs, and then based upon just recommendations based upon how many hours or years or whatever is on certain equipment, roofs, things like that. I guess my question is that in perpetuity? Do we expect to always be 247 million behind? Are we getting further behind? You know, what is our situation? You know, is this a dire situation? Is this a status quo of up, we're $247 million behind, but that's okay? That's what we expect to always be, and we'll always kind of keep traction at that number? Or is, 5-10 years from now, we're $500 million behind? Does anybody have that metric? Anybody have that number? Or?
So through the chair to Member Pitcher, to some degree, deferred maintenance is a moving target. And I say that because different organizations have different standards for when, you heard Mr. Weiss talk about it's beyond its recommended useful life. That is not a hard and fast. Depending on the materials that you build into school, and I know you understand this, you might have a higher quality that exceeds the design life. So yes, there is a recommended useful life for any piece of equipment or material that's in a building, but oftentimes, and I think the district would confirm this, is we exceed those lives, right? And DEED has a standard that they publish for when something's eligible for major maintenance that I would argue is not nearly aggressive enough. And so if in your projections, you set on millions and millions of dollars of deferred maintenance, and arguably maybe a good portion of that doesn't need to be replaced. And I think that's what you're hearing when Member Yunt's asking questions about who assessed it and determined that it must be replaced, is that there are all kinds of guides for recommended useful life, but it varies, right? So, you know, the district, I don't know if the $245 million that's mentioned in here is the deed criteria. That's the deed number, and I would argue that's not a number I would plan funding against, and I wouldn't recommend that anyone do that. Based on what I have seen in the past, I know the district in the past has done different projections, not using deeds criteria, and it's been at times a fraction of what deed asks school districts in this state to project. So I would not, if that's the criteria that was used here, I would not build a funding plan against it. That's my opinion. Now, having said that, I think the list that the district's been bringing forward that are based on like real-time assessments is useful, and that we can budget against that to a degree. And like I said earlier, I think there's a transitioning occurring in the state, not just for us, where local municipalities are having to look at this and go, you know what, maybe you shouldn't plan on partnering with the state of Alaska for funding to support these needs. But that's relatively new. And so, yeah, it's going to take some time to adjust to that. The school board's always welcome, we do this every year, to bring forward a deferred maintenance request and ask for whatever you think that is a reasonable request based on your assessment. We take all of that into consideration. This year was a 3% increase to the operating, and at the last meeting, we talked about trying to come up with some mechanism on a recurring basis to start putting money forward in a capital budget to support schools, and that's what we're doing. Now, if the argument is $2 million a year is not enough, I guess my question would be, well, what is? I'm not doing the deferred maintenance projections. That's coming from the school district. And I know that deed requires all schools in the state to do that. I don't necessarily agree with their criteria. And certainly we can depart from that and do our own assessment. And I think that's why you were hearing some of the questions from Member Yunt earlier is, well, how are we making that assessment or determination about what we think should be replaced, and on what timeline should that be replaced? That's not getting you the hard answer you want. I know you want me to give you a number every year, but I don't think we're there yet. I think that's going to happen as we continue to move away from potentially state support or state partnership in addressing, you know, some of these major infrastructure needs in schools. But it's not going to affect just the Mat-Su. It's going to be a statewide. It already is a statewide issue. But we haven't heard. I mean, the state hasn't really taken a position or given us any read on where that's going to go moving forward for the entire state.
Right, so it's just a discussion. My next question would be concerning these projects, $15 million and change, that sort of thing. We have ESSER funds. For those who may not know, that was COVID money given to us by our beloved federal government. So say that this year we've got the $18 million in ESSER funds, correct?
Through the chair to Member Pitcher, this year we are expending $17 million in ESSER funds.
$17 million. Were we able to use those for deferred maintenance?
Through the chair, there were really no. There were some projects that potentially, I don't think any of the projects on this list we would have been able to use those COVID relief funds for. We had to use COVID relief funds in support of the pandemic, and a part of that was in reducing learning loss. And so we had a great deal of flexibility on those funds, but for the most part, they could not be used for major deferred maintenance projects like this. There might have been one of the HVAC projects that we could have explored with the state and ability to connect that to our COVID response, but it's unlikely. And so we could not have spent all of those dollars on major maintenance projects. And our addressing of the learning loss that occurred early in the pandemic was to make sure that we maintained staff positions and kept class sizes low. So we did not add positions with those ESSER dollars. We weren't bringing in new classroom teachers. We were continuing with the positions that existed in the budget. We used ESSER to be able to fund those because we did not receive increases from state revenue that would allow those positions to be maintained.
So this year, we have 17 million. Next year, it's all gone. Could you have not used $17 million in your own budget for these $15 million in deferred maintenance costs and use that $17 million of ESSER funds for the education?
Through the chair, we could have potentially done that, but we would have had to eliminate $17 million in positions to have had those funds available.
Do you expect to lose $17 million in positions in 2025?
We expect to lose $18 million worth of a combination of positions and discretionary spending. That's the proposal that the board approved on Wednesday,
So we expect to lose those positions,
portion of those positions.
a portion. And we could have lost those positions last year and had these projects done then, right? This is all conjecture.
Through the chair, all I can say, Mr. Pitcher, is that the board does have, the board has approved the expenditure related to ESSER 3. And so when those funds were provided to the district, the plan for expenditure, that grant, was brought before the school board for approval. The school board approved how those funds were expensed, as well as how the budget is allocated. So could we have done something different? Yes, absolutely. There could have been a different plan for ESSER funds, and there could have been a different plan for the expenditure of school district funds. It would have been an opportunity cost. If we wouldn't have funded a teacher, we could have used those funds to pay for something else.
I guess what I'm thinking is, if at the time comes when this goes to bond, and again, it goes before the taxpayers vote it down. That happens repetitively. How are we gonna pay for projects that start breaking? Because again, we're just asking, the taxpayers, please, take this bill, pay our bill for us. And then if they vote it no, the roofs fail, different things fail, boilers, whatever, what's the recourse?
Well, through the chair, that will essentially be for the two bodies to determine. If the bond fails and there is not support for these major maintenance projects in this scenario, excluding the charter schools, then we will have to identify and work with either the school board and or the borough in addressing projects as needs come up. And so whether that is through a process like the manager talked about, where these projects that in some cases have been deferred since 2011 continue to be deferred until funds can be identified to support these projects, or whether we work with the school board and have funds from fund balance that may be identified to support some of these projects, we will have to work with the two bodies to make the decision on how to support funding for major maintenance, whether it's this list of projects or a different list of projects. That will be for the board and the assembly to determine.
So we wouldn't want to get to that point, to state the obvious. I'm just a firm believer we need to set our financial house in order on this deal. We sure wouldn't want that to happen. When I look at the turf, just as an example, just to pick one, $2.8 million, it's got a 10-year life. Going forward, you would think that it would be wise that we could say we should save 1/10 of that each year. Is that an option? Can we save? That you would then use for that project at the end of its life, as opposed to the end of the life is here, now what do we do?
Well, through the chair, the board is limited on the amount of funds that can be set aside in fund balance. Fund balance cannot exceed 10%. So we would have to develop a process by which those funds could be set aside and potentially committed for a specific process, thus making it not part of the fund balance. And we'd have to be very intentional with the board about doing that. And remember that the current board cannot bind a future board. So if a board into the future wanted to use those funds for a different purpose, they would have the authority to uncommit those funds and use them for for something else.
And that may be what it'll be, and I understand that. I guess my question was, and I didn't, articulate this, was more directed towards the borough, where the borough owns the properties. Would they want to kind of start planning out some of those things?
Through the chair, I'm not sure why I get to answer that question. What you're scratching at is a great question, right? You're talking about forward funding projects instead of doing it via debt. I'm not going to make a case for either because I'm not the one that makes those decisions. But I will say this. When we sell bonds at a low interest rate, when the market's favorable, it's actually not a bad deal. The challenge, I think, too, as a taxpayer, is if you want to tax people now, put it in a government savings account, and use it later, I think we're going to get some pushback from the community. That can be a tough sell. When the rates are right, bonds aren't a bad deal. I think what you have to evaluate, and Assembly has to do this. I'll give you a look into what they have to grapple with. Is you got parks and recreation infrastructure, you got transportation infrastructure, you got schools, right? Those are probably the three bigger ones. So to me, it seems a little bit more logical to bond for schools because your useful life is much longer than a road and typically much longer than most of your parks and recreation infrastructure, not all. But I think that's why, looking at schools and having a bonding instrument is not a bad plan. It just has to be part of a larger plan that balances all of our infrastructure needs across the entire borough, not just schools. And when you look at a school and say, hey, I'm going to get 50 years out of that, and we're going to buy debt on 20 years, that seems like a fairly reasonable proposition. I used an example of a bond last year from Anchorage where they bonded for an ambulance. I would not support that. I don't know why we would bond for something that doesn't even have 10 years of useful life. So I don't have fundamentally a problem with bonding for schools. I think actually if you're going to bond for something, in my opinion, I'm not speaking for the Assembly, that bonding for schools probably makes more sense than bonding for roads because you just have a much longer useful life. And so what we're doing now, and the benefit of not passing a school bond in the past 10 years is our debt service payments are falling off. The question is, do we want to reinvest that in schools every year? And that's what the capital budget is intending to do for the first time this year. And that may not be enough, right? We may have to come up with a figure that's larger. But I think it's going to be a tough sell, I'm just speaking out of turn, for elected officials to take taxes, keep those rates higher, take it and put it in a government savings account for the future. I just don't think that's going to resonate out here very well. And so I think it can be a mix of both, forward funding, and at the same time, if the market's right, bonding is not a terribly bad financial decision. I mean, I'm not a big proponent for debt in general, and it certainly needs to be managed, but in the right market, for the right items, it can be a useful instrument.
So the taxes, I mean, that's, let's just call it what it is. That's money taken under threat of force. So we're saying that it would be better to, and I'm just talking here, you're saying it'd be better to pay interest than to make interest on that money.
Through the chair, I'm not making a case for either. I'm explaining some of the ins and outs. Like, I also can see where a taxpayer would look at this and go, wait a minute, if you're going to tax me now, I want it to go to work. I don't want it set in an account for 10 years, waiting on your turf field to be up for replacement. I just think that's going to be a tough sell for many, and I think that's a lot of reasons you don't see that being done at a lot of places in government, because it's a really tough sell, because I think it's just a whole lot harder to defend that strategy, that approach. And when, again, going back to why we're where we are, when the state participated in bonding, it was a pretty good deal for us as a local municipality. I'm not saying if you zoomed out to the state and local and looked at that it was the best decision, but as a local, municipality, if you can get the state to pay for 70% of your ask, locally speaking, that's a pretty good deal. And that's our way of tapping into state revenue. What we don't know moving forward is that going to be a viable option moving forward? And even if it is, do we trust that the state will follow through on its debt service obligations? I kind of agree with Mr. Young on that one, and I have my reservations about whether or not that's a sound strategy. But again, I think what I'm saying here isn't that it's better to pay interest than make interest. I'm just looking at it holistically and going, I think there's a place for bonds when they're put in their right place, and when those decisions to potentially put those forward and sell those is done in a market that's favorable. Right now, and over the past couple of years, I wouldn't suggest that we would want to do that because the market hasn't been that favorable, and it really wouldn't have been the best timing. So you have to be able to plan for that. I'm just saying I think there could be a place for it. It just needs to be in its right place, not a solution for everything.
Thank you, Manager Brown.
Further questions? Yes, Assemblyperson.
May I?
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Bob.
Go ahead, sorry.
You want me? Okay, I'll go. So it does make one. I have just want to understand a little bit. So it makes sense. Most of us, me personally, have a mortgage. We get a mortgage for the building, but we don't get mortgage for dining set or new lawn. So I almost feel like these are two separate things. So maybe Katie can help me understand this. So is the charter school request to keep it together, meaning my understanding that all charter schools want to stay together as a one bond, or they want to be included with the major maintenance? Who benefits? Is one thinking it'll push me over the board through the voters, or the other way around? My question is, each schools, I understand that would be very difficult for each school to pass its own bond because it's, but when they're all together, all five of them, I think it's, voters probably will support that idea. Or we're talking about combining the major maintenance and the all charter schools combined. I just want to understand what is the request that we're hearing from people.
Of course, thank you. Through the chair to Member Fonoff. So the administration's original recommendation was to propose a bond project not to exceed $85 million. That $70 million would be designated to charter schools. We actually haven't even gotten to that presentation yet, but I'm happy to roll into it when the time is right. And so we do have information to share regarding the charter schools and their request. And that $15 million was to be designated for major maintenance projects. Our strategy, the administration's strategy in bringing that forward was that we would have a school bond project that would be of benefit to a broader subsection of the community. Not just charter schools, not just maintenance, but where many individuals connected with schools might see a benefit in the project. And so we had originally recommended that they be grouped together. The board, after a lengthy and detailed discussion, not unlike what we've been having this evening, felt that it was most appropriate to separate the major maintenance and the charter school construction bond project so that the voters can make the decision on the two sort of avenues separately, so that the $70 million for charter schools would be grouped together in one ballot measure, or ballot, whatever the correct term would be, and that the major maintenance would be second. Some charter families spoke differently this evening. I'm not commenting on that, but the two resolutions that were passed by the school board that we are presenting to the assembly tonight have two separate projects, one for major maintenance and one for charter schools.
Assemblyperson Yount, were you trying to, or?
Yes, ma'am. I was just going to comment real quick that,
Sure.
you know, we cannot tie the hands of a future assembly or school board, but I'm hoping with as Manager Brown said earlier, with us putting forth money in this year's budget to replace these 6 boilers, and with the assembly wanting to do the right thing, what I think is the right thing, and we take over the deferred maintenance of the major stuff in the future, because again, we own the buildings, not the district. I hope that we do create the precedent and the pattern that we continue to forward fund and do this out of pocket every year. Every year, what we pay in debt service will go down a little bit, and then, you know, we're already about halfway done paying off all those bonds in total. So we get out there another 10 years, give or take, might be 11 or 12. I don't know exactly right now, but when we get out there a little bit farther, we actually have no debt service remaining. We have none left from the original bond package, and then we can attack deferred maintenance, with a much larger sum every year. With where interest rates are right now, I can tell you I'm not comfortable bonding for any deferred maintenance with where fees and rates are. I think we should do it out of pocket, and we should prioritize it each year. I feel differently about the charter schools. I have from day one. You've seen I've never supported bonds for roads that didn't have state match money. I feel differently with the charter schools because, A, the community is growing and we need more seats, and B, when you put seats, or students, I should say, into those buildings, they come with their own revenue. When you build roads, the only revenue to do that and to maintain them is our property taxes each year. When you do that with a student in a school, the state does participate in education, so does the feds, and so that will actually help pay for the bond, if not pay for the whole thing. One of our charter schools in the Mat-Su Borough right now, Frontieras, pays 100% of their debt service annually out of their budget. So they have X amount of students going there, they have X amount of revenue, and then they have their debt. They cover 100% of that. With that being said, they still had to ask the permission, actually in today's environment, with the programs that are available for financing, even if the charter schools are going to pay 100% of their own payment, we still have to ask the permission of the voters, which I think is a good thing. But anyway, I do hope that in the future the Assembly continues to help with deferred maintenance, and I think we have a chance to, over the course of the next couple of years, to really create that precedent, hopefully. So I'll leave it at that. I do hope that we just continue to do it out of pocket. So thanks.
Thank you. Yes, Assemblyperson Benir, go ahead.
How many hours do we have on these emergency generators? Any idea what year they
I don't have them in
are?
front of me, but I can get the hours. It's in the thousands, and on a couple, it's in the tens of thousands. I can get the individual hours on each one.
Okay.
I don't have them in front of me.
Well, because,
Also to note, several of them, we've been having extreme difficulty on finding parts because they're so old. That's another issue with a couple of them, is the parts are no longer made or haven't been made in over a decade, and trying to buy them on eBay or get them from people or whatever has been pretty challenging at a couple. And then, as I mentioned before, a lot of the generators that are on that current list don't power some of the critical systems that a lot of the other schools power and probably should be needed with current updates and codes. They were just built at a time where maybe, like Palmer Middle, for example, there's been 5 additions built on that school, so the original generator was built with the second addition. It only powers certain circuits in the school and not everything. So some of these, it would be powering more of the school as well when it's updated for deferred maintenance, replaced. Just as an example. That's a couple schools. That's not every school, but.
okay, and then like on the windows,
Yep.
Like a south-facing window will probably go out sooner than a
Yes.
north-facing
Yep.
window and stuff for thermal. Thermal imaging through weatherization, that type of
I know
thing?
they did some back then. I'd have to look. I know there was a little bit done on these couple schools mentioned when they were originally on the 2011 bond to be replaced. I'd have to go back or look through some of the borough.
I know
bonds to see if
I've
that was
done
done.
stuff through Alaska Weatherization where they'll come out with a thermal camera and,
Yep.
maybe a second opinion.
Sure.
Assemblyperson Kendall? Yeah, school board, I'm sorry, school board Pitcher, did you have your light on when I recognized Ron? You didn't? Okay. That's right, you too. Oh, okay. Thank you, go ahead.
I agree with Assemblymember Yunt. In our discussion that we had at the last school board meeting, I'm not comfortable with increasing for major maintenance, especially bleachers and turf maintenance when we live in Alaska and turf is used just not long of the year. I think there's other things that we could look at they may not be popular, but PTA at each school, doing fundraisers, the clubs and sports, the fees that we use, who's using the turf in the summer. Obviously, we're not using it during the school year that much. I completely support our public charter schools. I really want to see those get passed and grow and to accommodate the wait list so that every parent can choose where their child goes and can direct their child's education. But when I look at the economy now and how so many people are suffering to even purchase the groceries, a lot of the families that I connect with almost on a daily basis have made serious financial sacrifices over the last couple of years because of the environment we're in. To ask them to pay more in property tax is just brutal to me. And Palmer City, I know, is looking at a brand new community center building that's going to raise taxes for Palmer City residents. I just want the tax burden to be the absolute lowest, especially during the really hard times, because a lot of the people that I know that have talked to me about this, they're working right now. They're not able to come to these meetings and speak. They're working in the morning. They're having other people take their kids to the bus stop because they're not home with their kids doing extra jobs. And I think that voice doesn't get represented here a lot. It's also easy to spend other people's money and to be kind of in a mindset when we're talking on this kind of scale. It doesn't seem like a lot, but when you're in the trenches of somebody's grocery bill, they can't afford to feed their kids because of inflation and what groceries cost, having a giant bill come for their tax assessment is not going to be good for them. So I think we should work with the agreement that we are and hope that we continue to work together in the future to do that for our maintenance plan. And on our side as a school board, look at what sacrifices we may have to make. If my generator goes out, I'm gonna have to come up with something until then, and that's not ideal, but we should try to keep in mind of running it as if it were our money right now, today. What would we do? And I think that that's certainly the sentiment I've gotten over the last month from the people that have contacted me, is they cannot afford to raise it. They wouldn't vote for something that was big. I know a lot of families that choose to do correspondence homeschooling public correspondence homeschooling, because they can't get into the wait lists. And I think that they find it, they would obviously not have to make certain very significant financial sacrifices for their lives if they could get into the school that they chose. And so then they would have more economic freedom. So there's going to be some economic shifts that happen. I see that those people would vote for the charter schools, certainly, and they might take that initial economic hit, but I really just cannot express enough how much I think we should maintain what our current major maintenance is for ourselves and try to bring the bond down to as small as possible. And if we had to look in the future for another bond, hopefully under better times, maybe that would be a different situation. But as it stands now, that's my sentiment.
Mm-hmm. School Board Burning, go ahead.
Okay, I have multiple questions, but my first one for Dr. Trini is, do you have a presentation on the bond package?
We do, and Deputy Superintendent Gardner would be happy to share it, although we've covered lots.
Then I'm going to defer my remaining questions until after I've seen the presentation. And Member Larson.
Could we request a break for 10 minutes, maybe?
Well, you want to take a break? Okay, so while we come back at, say, 10 minutes to 9, so since we're only, third of the way, I guess, through. Okay. let's go ahead and call the meeting back to order, please.
Sure, learned something new today.
So unless somebody has a really burning question, I am going to
I do.
acknowledge the,
I apologize, Mayor. but-
okay. I wanted to acknowledge the last question that was asked before we went off
Yeah,
regarding the
yeah.
bond proposal, but go ahead, sir.
Yeah, I'm usually really brilliant, right, anyway, but I just want to talk about the bonds real quick, and that's why we have lively debates. I 100% support the bond for maintenance. And let me explain why. Everybody that I have talked to also support those bond maintenance. This building is 50, 60 years old, not this section, and it runs great, and it is very beautiful when you walk into it and walk through it, is because of the maintenance upkeep. Nobody sees what's behind the doors in the maintenance area. Now, my table saw broke this weekend. It's 35 years old, so the motor went out, as well as the cable that attaches to the actual saw blade. So I priced it out, because I thought, okay, I can, I tore it apart and priced it out. It's gonna cost me $400 in used parts to replace it, and I can go to Lowe's or Home Depot and buy a table saw for $400. The same thing goes on with these old boilers. You can get parts, and you can get parts that are been rebuilt, but by the time you're done building them or rebuilding them, you're gonna end up putting more money into them than it's worthwhile. As far as the fields go, before the bond, because I was on this board before that bond came out, kids were suffering severely from shin splints when they were running or hurt while playing football on the fields. And for instance, the Wasilla football field wouldn't allow anybody to use it except the Wasilla football team. It was grass. Because anybody that got on it in the summertime, especially if it rained, would rip up that field. And by the time the football team was done with it, that field was, the whole center section was mud. So we went with turfing 5 different schools. One was brand new, and now they're 10 years old. And if we don't maintain those, and I don't know if we can get the money through bonding or through some other method, we're gonna go right back to it, where these fields are gonna deteriorate, the bleachers are gonna deteriorate, everything's gonna go south. Now, I've spent 9 days in the Arctic Winter Games and talked to a lot of parents that have athletes in the Arctic Winter Games as well as in our school system, and none of them did not support the bond for maintenance. Because most of them knew what sports fields were like, and the maintenance guys that were there that I talked to went back and showed me a couple of the areas that need maintenance, especially in generators. I used to deal with generators when I ran correctional facilities, because the same thing, if you didn't have a dependable generator when the lights went out, let me tell you, when you got 400 or 500 inmates, you better be able to turn the lights back on, okay? And the same thing was there, because the state would defer those, and the same thing would happen. You would have a generator that may fail. But we, of course, we tested them, and the state didn't want to replace them, just repair them, but you can only repair them so long. So my viewpoint on the $15 million is everybody I have talked to is in favor of it, but we should be in favor of it. We've got to maintain those. It's like maintaining this beautiful building here. This is I believe, was the original school. And that was how long ago? 80 years ago, 70 years ago? And it's been maintained so it can have a useful life. And same thing with our fields. And I just wanted to throw that out there. Don't don't flush down the maintenance and don't flush down upkeep on our sports arenas. And since those sports arenas and sports fields have been up, the scholarships have increased for these kids to get to college, and track and soccer and football, because those sports fields can be used all summer long by all different groups, not just the football team. So it's used by our whole community, and we need to keep those and keep them up, maintained. And I'm not sure how we're gonna do it, but if they say that it need to be maintained, and they're high on our maintenance list, we need to work on it and get those done, as well as the boilers, generators, and everything else.
Further discussions, comments? So should we proceed to the next presentation?
And thank you, Madam Mayor. We're going to try to do this as the lightning round, because I think we've had a lot of discussion about bonds, but so much is been focused on the major maintenance. I don't want to shortchange the needs of these schools and the information that we've pulled together, and just the support from the public charter school community, particularly for these 5 schools that we've had. So I will try to move very quickly. First, what we have is some information regarding each school. I will also point out for the assembly that all of this information and additional is available in the handout that you see. This is information that's been pulled together to really understand more about these schools and their facility needs. And I'll touch on each school specifically, because all of their needs are a little bit different. So Academy Charter School is unique in that they do have a facility that is owned, but they have an interest in expanding their program. And so the need that this school has in being able to expand their program, both in terms of grades and numbers of students. So the facility that is costed out here and is proposed is really for an addition, for a second part of their facility that will support that program expansion. Theirs is the only expansion that is noted in the slides, but I will talk about some intent that exists in some of the other schools to expand if there are funds available to build out a facility. So the second is American Charter Academy. American is a school that exists in really a strip mall. It is not an ideal education environment for their school and their program. And we have designated through the school site selection process land for them to build. They started the design process and are just about completed with that design process. However, they really took an approach with that design thinking that they were going to have to sort of live within their own resources. And so they took a very conservative approach in terms of what might be available for their growth. So while they don't propose here that they would be looking to expand their program, that is something they may consider if there is a bond that would be available to support their building project. They do have students who contact them on an annual basis hoping to join their school. While they aren't necessarily maintaining a large waiting list, they are considering how best to look to expand their program if they had a facility. Birch Tree Charter School is probably the school that from my perspective, speaking for myself, has really sort of the greatest sense of urgency. Birch Tree Charter School is one of our larger charter schools and is in a facility that has been sold. And so the potential for them to continue operations where they currently exist really is not a possibility. We are going to have to find a new home for Birch Tree in the very near future, and a new facility that they can design in support of their needs is what we believe to be the best option for this school and the unique program. Likewise, if there is a facility that will be available to them, they are interested in expansion. They do have a healthy waiting list. While the new school facility may not incorporate all of those students, it would certainly incorporate most of the students on that waiting list and allow their program to grow. And so some of the estimates here in terms of square footage might have to be adjusted slightly if there is an opportunity for growth. Midnight Sun Charter School, or really officially as Midnight Sun Family Learning Center, is a public charter school that is in a leased facility, but their interest is not in building a new facility, it is in purchasing the existing facility. The owner of the facility has indicated that he's interested in selling the facility to them, so that it would be something that is owned, and eventually they would not have to continue with lease payments and could focus resources on improving the facility that exists. Because they'll be operating in the facility that they currently use, growth for them is really not anticipated at this time, at least not in terms of large numbers. And then finally is Twinley Bridge Charter School. Twinley Bridge Charter School is also a school on the list that doesn't currently have a lease payment because it is an owned facility, but they have a number of upgrades and some expansion that they are proposing to occur for their facility. And when I talk about upgrades, I mean things like sprinkler systems. We're not talking about a Taj Mahal remodel. So there are some basic infrastructure needs that they have been saving and working to be able to do into the building. The design work for Twinley Bridge Charter School is completed. We actually went to bid for the work that they were planning, and the bid came back at more than double what the estimated costs were and far exceeded the resources that they had available. So it is probably the most modest of the projects, and the school has identified some resources that would be available to help move things along. So we did provide some information that outlines the existing construction costs. Our estimates are based on a cost per square footage. The square footage estimates align with what the state's recommendation is. The schools, as we work through the design process, will have great flexibility to try to bring some of those size requirements down, and we will work closely with them, not having to follow the deed specifications, to try to build the most efficient buildings possible. The other item that is on this list talks about the deferred maintenance estimates, I believe. The debt service estimate. I want to be very clear that these are very rough estimates. This information would need to be provided by the borough, but this was information that was requested by the board. We wanted to do our due diligence to understand how that cost might compare with their current lease payments. And then I think I can skip the major maintenance list. We've talked about that quite a bit.
Okay. All right. Yes, sir, go ahead.
Okay, Dr. Trainee, under the previous state bond debt reimbursement, if the state were to reinstate that under the previous rules it operated under, would any of the charter schools that we are looking at bonding for, would that qualify for state reimbursement under the previous rules? Well, I shouldn't say previous, but the bond debt program that we were used to in the past.
So it hasn't existed since I've been back in Alaska. So I'm not an expert, but as the way I understand it, no, none of these projects would qualify under the previous program.
Would we be eligible or able to solicit, and this is probably the wrong environment to do that in now, but in the future, should the environment change, would we be able to solicit additional state funding to augment the bond debt, or is there any prevention from anything preventing us from doing that?
This is the square footage question, right? That allowable square footage. Yeah. So there's lots of hypotheticals there. First, I guess the first one would be the borough would make this ultimately. But the way I understand it, the state had established some allowable square footage per student that you had in your district, and you'd have to establish how many students you had, and then they'd say you're eligible for bond debt reimbursement up to this amount of square footage, and we would be over that square footage. And so under the old program, we probably wouldn't be eligible if it like magically reappeared right now. Do you want to add anything?
So the district has to establish and have approved by the state what are called attendance draws and attendance areas. And those are more complicated than just Wasilla High School has an attendance draw. For us, for example, the Wasilla area attendance draw includes Reddington, so it's not just high school specific. You have to have unhoused students in an attendance area in order to qualify for the school bond debt reimbursement. And previously there were different levels of reimbursement, so there were different criteria that you had to meet, and I I don't have enough information to be able to speak to them specifically, but that unhoused students requirement, we will not be able to meet for these charter schools because there is some space and capacity in the areas where some of these charter schools exist in our brick and mortar schools. So that's hard for charter parents and families to sometimes understand, especially in a situation like Birch Tree Charter School where they're about to lose their facility. We are absolutely unhoused, but under the state's rules, we would not qualify for that bond debt reimbursement.
And my last question is, since I've never been on the board during a bonding issue for the school district, forgive this question, but is a bond, a government issue bond, is it refinanceable, or once it's sold and we're stuck under the terms that it was sold?
Bringing in the experts. I don't know. It's like the closer.
Through the mayor to school board member Berge. The school bonds, any bonds, can be refunded, is the term for refinancing in the bond world. Normally we do that when interest rates drop and we can get a better rate of return on those bonds.
Further question, follow-up, or are you fine? Okay, okay. Assemblyperson McCollum?
No, this is just, so when Katie was speaking, she said that we would not be going through deed for these. We wouldn't need deeds approval for this. And am I correct in listening all tonight that we could actually have more control over the buildings that we build, maybe more reasonably expensed even? Is that maybe for Brown, Mr. Brown? Because we're not working through the state. That may be something that is really worth sharing, that we get to have more control and we can do it with a more, cost-effective way.
Yeah, so through the chair to Member Cullum, that's absolutely correct. We would be able to control that, whereas deed, when you enter into a project agreement with them in a bond debt reimbursement arrangement, they get to dictate a lot of the criteria for your design and what you build. We won't have that. We would essentially probably largely defer to the district's design criteria manual and any concessions that they may be willing to make. And I think we've seen evidence of that with the American Charter design. It progressed and a lot more cost-effective, I think, design because there weren't those state requirements that were overlaid on the project.
Further question? Assemblyperson Nowers?
I just wanted to clarify, when we refund a bond, if that's a proper word, there are some fees associated with doing that, so it's not as simple as, oh, interest rates dropped to 0.5%, let's do this, because it might still be a money loser unless the interest rate has dropped enough to cover the fees associated with refunding.
Through the mayor to Assemblymember Nowers, when we refund a bond, we look at the total package. As with any bond issue we do, there are set costs for issuance of a bond. They usually run about $500,000. Doesn't matter what the size of the bond is. Approximately on the high end, it's about $500,000. So whether we refund a previously issued or we're issuing new money, we're going to have issuance costs that are including the cost of the broker, the attorneys that are involved, travel time. There's a whole lot of things that go into that. However, we would never structure a refunding that we didn't know we were saving, and the borough has done this in the past, that we weren't saving at least 5% or more on the overall cost of the bond, including interest. So we're always saving if we're going to do a refunding, even if there are costs involved.
Okay, thank you. And just not on that topic anymore, but what I'm kind of hearing some of the discussion up here is, what I kind of tease out is, can the borough just pay for major maintenance? And I want to put a data point out there, like every 1 mil of taxation on property taxpayers brings in about $12 million. And 1 mil on an average home out here, a $340,000 home, which is now probably $360,000, but that's $340 a year on folks. And so when we're talking about, well, can the borough just come up with, can we magically pull some money out? We're pulling it out of taxpayers' pockets, and we're already putting 65 to 70% of the funding to the school district. So you're pulling even more. So I'm just very cautious about that. I don't know of a magic pot funding, and I kind of come back to this bond again. That it seems like there are real needs as far as maintenance. The borough doesn't have. We're going to try to put some money towards it, but the needs are greater. And I really, in terms of supporting the charters, I do not see how this passes if you don't have the maintenance bonds on there. So I'm afraid if we, not only are there real needs in other areas besides the charter schools that benefit those folks, if we don't make this a package that benefits the community as a whole, we're setting up the charters to fail if we split this. So I guess I'm really appreciating the discussion, but that's kind of how I think we need to look at this in terms of holistically the charter schools benefit and the folks who are not at the charter schools, and the community can say yes to that instead of well, I'm not going to benefit, I'm just going to vote no, and then we don't have any movement forward on either of these needs for the charter schools or the maintenance. And I would hate to see that.
Okay, further question? Yes. School board member.
I'd just like to voice my support for keeping them in a package deal, both bonds together. I think they both have different pools of supporters within our community. I know people in Talkeetna aren't driving 2 hours to come to any 5 of these charter schools. Just doesn't make sense. So why would they vote for the large portion of bond? But they do have an elementary school on the docket here for major maintenance, so those voters might vote for that. I'd also like to entertain just some thought toward sending out mail-in ballots to the people who are both parents working 2 jobs. Their voice might not be heard on voting day for the bond. And if we really are concerned with economically disadvantaged people and their voice, then that's the way to find that voice and not have to rely on them driving to a polling place when they have to work and they can't take time off. I'd really like to see some interest in that. But I do support both bonds being in one package, and I think it would gain the most amount of support within the valley. I do think splitting them would set up either one for failure, if not both.
School board member Larson, go ahead.
Just quickly, when the $212 million bond came up, there was a group that organized themselves outside the school district in the borough assembly and the borough, and did a really great job of presenting the bond and what it would do for the community. And if this occurs again, I'm sure there's a group out there that can do the same thing. It's telling the community what you would receive if you voted on this. And because, as you know, so many times, well, not in this borough, but millennia ago when I was in Anchorage, you would go to the voting booth and you'd look at this humongous bond, and you just say no because it was too complicated and you didn't have any information on it. But that's how that $212 million bond was sold by a group that actually went out there and pushed and told the community what they were getting. In other words, they weren't pushing it like, you got to do this. This is what it is about. So if this was a combined to go up in front of the people, I think that's what would it take to actually push this thing through.
Assembly person Fauna.
To Cheyenne, this would be, if you had to just roughly, I don't know if you have calculated with you, put the number of the 15 million plus the 73 million or whatever, on average home price, if addition in that increase, would you be able to at least kind of throw a bulk number there just so we have an idea if it was to pass as a combined thing.
Through the
Or
mayor,
maybe Stephanie already had that number figured out or not, because she did put that in percent, but I would like to just have an idea.
through the mayor to Assemblymember Fonoff, I have not worked that number yet, but I can get back to you with a calculation tomorrow. I don't have it with me now, no.
Any further discussion? Yes, school board member.
On
McCollum?
top of what Mr. Bonoff said, so you would be able to tell us what the mill rate increase would be for this bond if it passed?
Yes, through the Assembly, or mayor to the school board member. Yes, I would be able to tell you what the estimated impact would be, because right now, we have a bond package, but until we actually go to sell it, I won't know what the exact debt service would be. So it's just an estimate at this point.
Can you present to us what the two packages together estimated would be and what each individual one would be estimated? Thank you.
Yes, I can, Mayor.
Thank you. Further questions, comments? Okay, do you have anything further to present to us? Are you talking, you got your 20,000 words in today, in the last hour or something? So are we ready to do parting comments? Okay. School board member McCollum, parting comments, ma'am.
I get to go first.
You get to go first.
Well, I just want to say thank you, and I really enjoyed all the discussion and hearing everybody's opinions about all of this. And again, I'm just so grateful that we have such a good working relationship with the borough, and that you're even considering giving the $2 million for deferred maintenance for us. I think we're really on a great track, and I appreciate that. And thank you. It was a great night.
Assemblyperson McKee, parting comments? Okay. Assemblyperson Vernier, parting comments?
I just wanted to thank everyone for coming out, and dear Lord, we thank you for your blessings. We wanted to thank you for the spring, the time of renewal. May we renew our faith in you, Lord. May our roots grow deep in your truth. We pray for our leadership, our first responders, our military, our teachers, parents, and our young ones. We pray for our veterans. Please bless them for their service. We pray for the sick, the lost, the addicted. We pray for our enemies. May we find common ground in your word, Lord. We thank you for your mercy and your grace. May you bless our valley and state. Please fill us with your spirit and bring forth a revival that we desperately need. May we receive your love. In Jesus' name, amen.
School board member Pritchard, parting comments, sir?
I'd like to thank all those who came out and testified today. I sure appreciate their comments and their concerns. Just like to say how much I support our charter schools. I would love to see these buildings be built to serve so many future students. And I really encourage ways and solutions to bring that to pass. And I'd like to thank the borough for all their comments and all their clarifications tonight. And other than that, drive safe.
Okay. School board member Kendall?
I just want to say thank you for all the work that went into the meeting and all the reports and participation, for everyone who came and spoke. I'm really excited about our public charter schools. I hope that the state will come up with something this year, but working towards treating them in an equitable manner to all of our public school students, including the correspondents. And I really look forward to seeing more charter schools get built in the valley.
Assemblyperson Nowers, parting comments?
Also, thank you to all the charter school members who came out and listened to what was perhaps not always a completely riveting discussion for hours, but really appreciate you coming out and participating. And then I just wanted to say or share on the Arctic Winter Games how great it was. And just one anecdote that Manager Brown shared with me, we were talking to a person from Team Alaska who had attended 17 Arctic Winter Games, and she actually said our opening ceremony, I mean, everything was great, but she said our opening ceremonies were the best of all of them. and like teared up about it, and it was just amazing. So I just wanted to share that anecdote.
Assemblyperson, School Board Member Murphy, go ahead.
I'd like to thank everybody for the presentations they did, and I leave our future funding in the borough's hands, and I hope you are able to come up with a working solution that is good for the district and the taxpayer. So, thank you and drive safe tonight.
Assemblyperson Yon, parting comments, sir?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Yeah, what an awesome evening. A lot of great comments from everybody, and super grateful. That's what we need in order to help us make good decisions. So I really appreciate that. I want to caution everybody and remind everyone, in the last 3 budget seasons, we've lowered the mill rate around 19% or so, and that's not luck. That comes back to discipline, and so I don't think we should build a package based on wants and needs. I think we should base it on needs, and what we really need to do is expand our charter schools, expand school choice, and get rid of these big waiting lists. So I look forward to seeing packages from schools individually that do just that. They take care of solving the problem of getting the waiting lists as small as possible and adding in more students to their schools. And I look forward to, I think we are definitely going to be moving forward with something this year to do just that, and I look forward to it. Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm. President Underwood, parting comments?
Yeah, just thank everybody for, again, coming out, kind of going to be echo chamber for what everybody else has said so far, and participating and listening, and also just want to share my support for our amazing charter schools, and how, just to reiterate, that Alaska has the best charter schools in the nation, which is exciting, and we have a lot of those right here in the Mat-Su Valley. So just seeing parents in the community have the choice to send their children and educate them in whatever form and fashion that they choose, I think is highly important. So appreciate all the discussion and how good these two bodies work together. As long as I've been on here, it always makes it a pleasant experience, and I just look forward to working with you guys in the future, and everybody have a great night.
School Board Member Swanson, parting comments?
I'd like to thank the public for coming out and the public testimony in support of the bonds being grouped together. I think that's the way to go, and I agree with you. And I really enjoyed the discussion on tonight's agenda, and I look forward to seeing the bond on the ballot this November. Thank you for coming out, and have a good night.
School Board Member Larson?
I want to thank the Borough Assembly for now putting money into major maintenance. It's something that's never occurred before because of the ability to bond in the past, and stepping up and seeing that the needs are there. I really, again, want to take my hat off to the Arctic Winter Games, but if we didn't have the good facilities and the borough-wide streets and networks and all the infrastructure, we wouldn't have been able to pull this off, having that many people come in. I understand that it meant millions to our community, and to be able to pull that big of an event off with very little trouble has really says something a lot about the Mat-Su Valley. It really does. And I hope in the future we can do the same thing with other big events. I appreciate all the hard work the borough has done and bringing their presentations and trying to figure out the needs of both the school district and the borough. I just want to say one negative thing tonight is I still don't have any faith in the STAR testing. I just had to throw that in there. I mean, I could go on about that, but I won't. Thank you.
Assemblyperson Gamble, parting comment?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is the same two topics that we were talking about at the first joint school board meeting, assembly meeting that I attended. Was about charter schools and deferred maintenance. Once again, I just want to say both my kids we're products of both public charter schools and public school system. Both my kids have excelled and done really well for themselves as adults. And so I think our schools are doing a great job educating our kids, both public charter and regular schools, public schools. Deferred maintenance, if you don't stay on top of it, it'll eat your budget up. When I was a full-time fire chief and the director of emergency services, we put all of our fire stations on a regular deferred maintenance program to keep from happening what's happening to the school district. So I'm glad that we're talking about this. It's something that we've got to get a handle on, and I appreciate the conversation tonight, and I appreciate the public coming out, and I appreciate the presentations by Dr. Trainee and Deputy Superintendent Gardner and the borough manager. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Some parting comments, Assemblyperson Fauna.
Thank you so much. Really enjoyed this meeting, and thank you for the presentations. And I was appreciated that when we had the break, you guys spoke to concerned citizens, and I want to encourage that to always be the working relationship. And if there is such behavior, I'm sure you guys do a real good job investigating and putting the end to it right away, so we don't have to, our kids wouldn't have to go through that. Our kids in school to learn what they're there to learn, not some certain ideologies, and I fully support charter schools, as I have 5 kids of my own that are in a charter school, and I obviously very involved in that school, but I also had privilege of completely taking a very detailed tour last year at the Academy Charter School with principal being here. Really appreciated the work done, because once you educate yourself, you understand that it's a very, very good options, and it takes a lot of parents' involvement. And I think those families are more invested. So those who haven't looked at those options, obviously you guys could consider that. And but on the same note, I want those charter schools to continue to have parents be the guiding source, because recently in the school that my kids are enrolled, there was an attempt to put based on many parents, it was fast track a replacement in the principal that did not necessarily reflect values of our community and overall, and without parents' input. So as much as I encourage and I stand by charter schools, I want parents to be very important role in that, because ultimately if we're treating both schools on the same level, then we don't want one to have more, I guess, less accountability than the other. And so I am hoping that that situation in our charter school will be resolved. But thank you so much, and I really appreciate our working relationship. And if we do more or regularly these things, we almost like work together to accommodate the goal that ultimately we as citizens benefit and our kids benefit, and grandkids probably for someone. So, and I really enjoyed being here, and I appreciate everyone.
So without any objection, I will adjourn at 9:32.
I object, I will be here longer.
You reject?